Midnight Swan is here. It's quiet, it's late, and there's nothing you need to do right now. Tonight, we'll rest while listening to title, What If Renesmee Raised? By Jacob. This is part 3 of this fiction. Let's move into the video. Renesmee was in her bedroom in the main house, just getting back from patrols with Leah and reminiscing about some recent conversations she'd been having with people other than Jacob. Of course, not seeing Jacob yet, especially after their first kiss, it being now over 3 hours, 4 minutes, and 56 seconds, was a huge problem because he was her balance in everything. Without him, she tended to spiral, and that's what she was doing now. The checkup after her period, the training where she hurt Jacob, the kiss, and thoughts of the future just exploding in her mind, and if she had to admit, she was frustrated. Renesmee really had to control her temper, remembering yet more questioning of her wants and desires. It frustrated her to no end that it was always a constant, "You're too young, you don't know what you want yet, you need other choices." How could anyone blame her for wanting to be with Jacob every second of every day? He's the one that supports her in her growth. He's never babied her, never treated her with anything but love and respect, treated her as his equal or more oftentimes way above that. He's he one that has made her a better person. He's taught her how to love unconditionally, how words, actions, and deeds portray that love. Even when she felt insecure about her looks, Jacob very forcefully, causing no doubts, showed her just how beautiful she was. Choices. That topic, which almost always came up, made her laugh. Jake's not a lack of choices, he is the choice. Even if Renesmee took away the supernatural abilities part. If she was just a teenager, she was still different from most. The man that she knew before she was born into the world is the man who she would marry, the man who would be the father of their children. The only man she would be with in the way that would seal their eternal bond. Is the world so deluded that this kind of love story, the notion of love at first sight, doesn't exist? It had to, because she was living it. This was the thing with building an evolving relationship with Jacob from birth. Everything she needed, he was there for. She knew that's what the imprint law said, but with Jacob she knew without a doubt it was so much more. After all, the wolves were not robots. The law can encourage them, or drive them to feel like they have to be a certain way, but in the end, they all had free will. The more she thought about it, the needs of the imprint was very similar to a vampire's need for blood. It's up to the vampire how to deal with the urges, and in her family's case, a choice to feed on animals instead of humans. The need for blood was there, but they still had a choice what to do with that need. So when some have suggested maybe seeing what's out there, or back to that stupid word, choices, that didn't make any sense to Renesmee. At the root of their relationship they were best friends. They could literally sit down next to each other and not do anything. Of course, as long as they were in contact with each other, and be as content as possible. When she was scared, a soft touch from Jacob, a whisper of, "I'm here Nessie," was all it took, and the fear was gone. Protector. My God, he was the true alpha of their tribe, with abilities that even they didn't quite understand or know the limits of yet. He still had not shown his true power, and God help everyone the day someone hurts her, because Jacob will not stop, he will never give up, until she is safe and sound. Big brother or even big sister. Jacob was both to her. From braiding her hair, playing dolls, to helping her understand the changes she was going through, he was everything she needed. Physically, godlike comes to mind. Physique-wise there really was no equal. Every inch of him was perfect. If she was blind, and someone asked her to describe what the perfect man would look like to her, then every detail, every description, would result in an exact replica of Jacob's body. Lover. Well, this one was something that she was just starting to understand, and it wasn't fair to judge him yet, but if what he did to her with a simple touch, a simple kiss, was an indication of what was to come, then she had no doubt they would be just fine in that department. Father. This was the ultimate closer for her. His patience, love, understanding with not only dealing with her, but with Claire. All the youth in their tribe, he was and will be the perfect father. The key was his selflessness, and this predated the imprint, so they can't blame it on that either. There was no person she'd met yet that wouldn't trust Jacob with their children, with their life. And if any more validation was needed, standing outside her door, knocking slightly, was the love of her life. She smiled as just like he always did. He stayed to the side if the door was open or knocked if it was ever closed. He was always the gentleman, giving her privacy when he darn well knew he never had to do that. There was nothing she would ever keep private from him. "Hey Ness, you got a sec?" Renesmee jumped out of bed, sensing the seriousness in his tone. She walked out the door to find him leaning solemnly against the wall. "Hey." She reached up on her tippy toes to kiss him on the lips. She was pleasantly surprised when he returned the kiss, and then gathered her up in his arms to hug her tight. Her smile widened as she felt their necklace beneath his shirt. She did good that Christmas. After a few minutes of silence, Jacob let her back down on the floor and stepped back a bit. As was usually the case. After they ended their hug, they both instinctively held each other's hand, Jacob rubbing circles on the back of her hand, following the pattern of their eternal symbol. Jacob ran his free hand through his hair, not quite looking at Nessie. "What's wrong, Jake?" Renesmee linked to him, now really starting to freak out. Was he upset about the kiss? This wasn't normal, Renesmee knew as she saw the change in Jacob. He was acting very reserved. I just want you to know how proud I am of you. I know I haven't been easy on you with the training and stuff, but you're just amazing. I realize you're becoming a strong and independent woman." Jacob paused to gather himself, hoping that this came out right. "I want you to know that I'm truly looking forward to the next phase of our relationship, but these past years have meant the world to me, Nessie. From our first connection to the plan to keep you with me, to you wanting to marry me, our connection, our hunts, our talks, just every second of every day I've spent with you has been the greatest moments of my life." Jacob lifted her trembling hand up to give it a quick kiss. "I'm going to miss my little princess." Jacob shook his head, feeling ridiculous. "I know it's stupid because you're here, I'm here, and we have so much left to do. I guess what I'm trying to say is thank you so much for every memory you've given me. It truly has meant the world to me. I don't think you'll ever understand just how much I needed you." He finally gathered the strength to look her in the eyes. "Oh Jacob." She reached a trembling hand up to the side of his face, projecting every single memory and how much every one of them meant to her too. Jacob brought her to him again, hugging her tightly. "Sorry for the drama, but after your checkup, after the training today, it really hit me the change is coming, and I just wanted to hold on to my little Nessie just a little while longer. Do you even realize how special you make me feel?" Renesmee could hear his heartbeat, and just like everything else in her life, it seemed that hers was slowing down to keep in step with his. It was one way he could always calm her. After a few minutes of just holding each other, Renesmee wanted to make sure Jacob was okay. "Are you feeling better, physically?" Jacob laughed. "Barely, you really kicked my butt." See, even something as simple as this, Renesmee thought. He could have easily sucked it up, not wanting her to worry, but that wasn't the whole truth. Thus he didn't keep things like this from her. "Can I do anything to make it up to you?" Ow growl escaped as Jacob could sense Nessie was up to something. "I think just holding my best girl in my arms is all I need." "You wanna tell me what has gotten you so frustrated?" "And he does it again," smiled Renesmee. "Just the whole choices discussion and all that stuff." This was always tough on Jacob. It was such an odd line to balance on between things making sense and having complete faith that just maybe he was the best choice for Nessie. "Jacob, can I ask you something?" Renesmee honestly didn't know why this came to her now, but with everything going on, she just wanted to see. "Sure." Jacob gave her a quick squeeze. Not daring to leave the warmth and comfort of his embrace, Renesmee asked, "So let's say hypothetically, Rosalie was a soft-spoken, caring nun. Alice hated fashion and party planning. Leah was a pixie. Esme didn't completely adore you, and I had chosen another mate. How would you really react to that? It was the only way to make me happy. I want you to be honest with me." She could feel his hesitation. She knew it was odd timing and in the end didn't matter at all. But still, she wanted to see because others had said that Jacob would have to do whatever made her happy. Even if that meant only being a friend. "You want my honest answer?" Well, I would take said mate on a hunt to get to know him better. Then there would be a terrible accident where the individual was ripped apart, disemboweled, where nothing identifiable was left, rabid wolves in the area and all. Then I would come back and kidnap you, taking you far away from everyone. Ian proved to you every second of every day that I was your best choice as a mate. I would make sure there was no doubt day in and day out. And if anyone ever tried to come between us, I would destroy them, wipe them from existence. Does that answer your question? Silence. Nessie. Sorry, forgot where I was for a moment. But yes, that did answer my question. Renesmee smiled. This was her choice. Take that imprint. Renesmee was literally bouncing up and down with excitement as she looked in the mirror, waiting for Jake to pick her up. It was very early in the morning, the sun nowhere near rising, but she was wide awake. This was unofficially their first official date, although no one came right out and said it, and she couldn't be more excited. It was supposed to be a late birthday present, or early depending how you looked at it, from Jacob, but she was marking it down as a date. Disney, the thought of going there with Jacob was just magical. She felt somewhat bad for her family, but for obvious reasons. They couldn't go and it didn't have as much to do with the sun as it did with the crowds. The family had decided to stay away from places like that but were still supportive of her and Jake going. Renesmee stopped bouncing as she thought about how sweet Jacob was the other week, coming to her room and saying he would miss his little princess. Renesmee bit at her bottom lip, thinking about that moment as they held hands and talked right outside her room. It was almost validation for all her musings on choices that night and then her choice showing up and just being the sweet and tender man he always was to her. They both knew the change was happening. For her it was odd at first and she could only imagine it being the same way for Jacob. Even now, looking in the full-length mirror in her room, it felt as if she was looking at something out of a Disney film where she had transformed magically into a full-grown woman. She giggled thinking at midnight she would turn back into the 10-year-old skinny girl that barely got to know her own skin before her body changed again. The change always felt weird to her when it happened. Since her mind was so much more advanced, she always overanalyzed everything and her growth spurts were just one of the many things that intrigued her. She looked at her body now. She could actually wear the same clothes as Aunt Rosalie, which was a blessing and a curse. Aunt Rose was a lot more open with her outfits whereas Renesmee was a bit more reserved. It was nice though to fill out the adult outfits and not get frustrated like when she used to try them on and they were just too big. Actually, it was almost the opposite now because some of Aunt Rosalie's blouses didn't fit properly, too small, and she still knew she wasn't done growing. Luckily they had found a dress for the trip that fit her perfectly. She was dressed in flowing red and black polka dot skirt that reached mid-thigh, but her leggings hid any skin above mid-calf. She just wasn't ready yet to show that much bare leg in public. While she definitely enjoyed Jacob's hand that always seemed to find her legs, she did not want to expose them to anyone else. The dress had somewhat thicker straps that hung on her shoulders. She suddenly got embarrassed thinking when Aunt Alice misinterpreted her wanting to wear a mini skirt type dress. That original outfit came on and off just as fast, especially without leggings underneath. She did not believe Jacob would like that outfit even though Alice insisted he would. It was very inappropriate for her to wear, especially if they were going to be in public. She had a fleeting thought that maybe she would try it on in private for Jacob, to see if he did like it. He was always honest with her and he was thankful he was even on things like fashion. She instinctively ran her hand over her promise bracelet as she thought about her fashion shows for Jacob. They used to be big productions when she was younger. Alice and Rose going all out. She remembered how Jacob would make her feel like such the princess when she would walk out in different outfits that her aunts dressed her in. She loved that Jacob would actually put thought into how he responded to what she wore. It would have really gotten old if all he did was say, "You look beautiful in everything." Whether he thought that or not, which she knew he probably did. He also knew how important it was for the truth, and that's what his reaction and responses would be. He never held back if he thought something was too short, too tight, too bright. He always gave his honest opinion. Of course lately the fashion shows had died down because Jacob had gotten a lot more quiet now in his responses. Renesmee of course knew why, and that as because he was seeing her in a different way than he did when her body resembled a young child. While the fashion shows had become a little more informal, what it did allow was for Renesmee to know what Jacob liked and what he didn't like. It allowed her more room in her closet as the things she could tell Jacob didn't like, well, those were promptly given away. Renesmee worked finishing up her hair next, making sure it was perfect. This was the easiest as she knew exactly how Jacob liked it, long and flowing. Sometimes he called it her Marita look, which he loved from the movie Brave. While she didn't wear it as wild and curly as Marita did, she did like the idea of free flowing over her shoulders and down to her waist. Especially now because it felt like Jacob's hands were always in her hair, playing with her curls. Running his hands through it as if he was combing out a knot, or just gently holding onto the free strands. It was like her hair was Jacob's promise bracelet, a place where he could find comfort in touching. So besides when they trained and hunted, free-flowing it would always be. As she adjusted the dress a little around her shoulders, she remembered debating wearing a shirt underneath. The straps from her dress were thick enough to modestly cover her bra straps and enough skin where she wasn't too worried, but it was still a big step for her. Her bare shoulders worried her slightly, but she fought that trepidation with fervor since the trade-off was being able to feel Jake's warm arms around her shoulder when he would hold her close. While she loved walking hand in hand with Jake, she absolutely now loved when he would pull her close and wrap his gigantic muscular tanned arm around her. The feeling was insane when his bare skin met hers and she could imagine what more skin available to that touching would feel like. She had to mentally kick herself for going off the reservation like that. But those kinds of musings had been a lot more common lately. They had planned for this though, and so nothing felt embarrassing, shameful, or even scary. They both dealt with it as they always knew they would, together. She knew the time was approaching, so she looked herself over one more time. Her leggings were on underneath her dress, reaching just below her knees. They were black, meshing nicely with the red and black polka dot dress. She finished her outfit off with red and white chucks. She laughed, thinking how horrified her aunts were that she preferred sneakers or flats to high heels and pumps. She couldn't help it though. While Jacob was a massive sculpture of muscles and russet skin, towering over pretty much everyone, she had thankfully got her height from her dad's side of the family. Standing at close to 5 feet 7 inches, and as Alice put it, with legs that go on and on. She was starting to truly look on the outside what she felt like she should look like now. She knew being taller definitely helped keep Jacob's neck from hurting. H suddenly exploded over her whole body, thinking about why Jacob would need to bend down more now. She closed her eyes, thinking about those luscious lips meeting hers. "Hey Nessie, you ready?" Jacob called as he knocked on Nessie's door. Renesmee practically jumped out of her skin as she heard the light knocking from behind the door. "Jake, oh my God, how did I not realize he was here?" "Just a minute, Jake." Renesmee tried to control her breathing, such an inappropriate time to have those feelings, especially as the source of those inappropriate feelings was standing right outside her bedroom. She quickly looked to the bed in the room. Nope, not going there. She schooled herself once again, wondering why of all days, this day was causing more emotions, new emotions to burst forth. She would have to ask Jake about it later. Looking at herself one last time, and now putting on her Mickey ears with the sparkly red bow in the middle, as the last of the Disney ensemble, she nodded her head. She was ready. She happily skipped to the door, opening it and jumping out into the hall. While every part of her wanted to just jump right into his arms, the next best thing was getting Jacob's approval for what she was wearing. Of course that would have been nice if she wasn't lost once again in her musings as she saw what Jake was wearing. He was wearing his normal black cargo shorts with tie strings at the ends and his tennis shoes. But what caught her eye was the very tight red Mickey Mouse t-shirt he was wearing. Apparently she didn't get the size quite right, boo-hoo, she smiled inwardly as the shirt was practically painted on, exposing every single muscle definition and line. They matched perfectly and he just looked dreamy. Jacob leaned in, seeing her expression. "Snap out of it, Ness, I think you're drooling." Renesmee shook her head, trying to regain some semblance of dignity. "Shut up, jerk." She playfully punched his arm. "Gee Jake, is that a shirt or body paint?" Jake tilted his head and scrunched up his face, trying to pull out his shirt to give him more room. "Yeah, not that I'm wearing some mouse on my chest, you're concerned how tight my shirt is. Don't forget who got me this shirt. I mean, I can change if you." "No. Oops, that was a little too quick. It's fine. Plus we'll match perfectly." Trying to defuse the situation, she quickly did her runway turned for Jake so he could see her. How do I look? Jacob took a second to respond, finally taking in all of her, realizing that Nessie definitely wasn't a little girl anymore. Perfect. Renesmee could see the truth in his eyes and just loved the fact Jake could make her feel like this with just a look. She quickly leaned into him, giving him a quick kiss on the lips. She always waited for the reprimand for kissing on the lips, but it never came. They were always quick and very tender, but where before it was always on the cheek, top of the head or chin, they had just automatically as of recently kissed on the lips. She really did think Jake might say something, and while she could sense a small struggle happening within Jake every time she did kiss him on the lips, he never objected. That was great news for her, because even though they had agreed to keep things as usual, she needed something to assure her that she was growing, and so was their relationship. Amazing what a simple, sweet and loving kiss could mean to her. It meant the world to her, and she was thankful their relationship was strong enough to allow for this new form of contact. You ready to visit the most magical place on earth? Jacob hugged her close, breathing in her scent. He had wanted to take her to Disney, knowing they missed out on the opportunity when she was younger. He knew changes were happening and could sense a big change coming. He wanted Nessie to have this experience before things got more complicated. Renesmee was pulling Jacob through the door as the goodbyes were said. They had a short flight on Carlisle's plane and a long day ahead. It was still very early in the morning, but she just couldn't contain her excitement. This would be her first real trip, and it would be with the man she loved, and there was no greater feeling than that. Blank. Renesmee and Jacob were sitting close together in the private plane, Renesmee staring out the window, her legs still bouncing from all the anticipation. They would be landing soon, and Renesmee would be lying if she didn't say she was feeling a little nervous. Hey Ness. Jacob squeezed her hand lightly, the one he had been holding since they got on the plane. Renesmee turned her head from the window to look at Jake. She could see a slight nervousness in the way he was acting. Not really looking right at her, and his free hand nervously picking at the airplane seat. "Sue, there are probably going to be some questions about us today." Renesmee tilted her head slightly, noticing the darkening of Jacob's cheeks. This was a different look for Jacob. She linked, "What's wrong, Jake? The people that we come in contact with today don't really know our situation, or our world in general. They won't be used to the way we are with each other." Jacob smiled as Nessie kissed him on the cheek. "Like that. They might interpret things differently." "What do you mean, Jake? Do you not want me to show you affection while at Disney? Because if that's the case, then we can turn around, and I never want to go there ever." Renesmee suddenly disconnected from Jake, pulling her hand back and folding her arms determinedly across her chest. Jacob sighed, reaching out to get her hand back. "That's not what I meant." "Geez." Jake playfully rolled his eyes. Renesmee wasn't sure she liked this conversation, and the thought of having fun at Disney was quickly turning to something else not so fun. She squinted her eyes a little as she let Jacob take her hand once again, but giving a slight warning to tread carefully. She understood Jake's position on certain things. But not being able to hold hands or kiss him was out of the question. That just wasn't ever going to stop. "Please just calm down, Ness. What I meant was telling everyone we imprinted or even we are soulmates might not go over too well in the real world. We have to come up with something else to define what we are." There goes that feeling again, Renesmee realized. Imprint, she understood. But they never really defined their relationship like that. Jake never referenced her as the imprintee because he always thought it was more than that. However, if people did want to understand she was Jacob's soulmate, then she didn't want to be around them anyway. Maybe returning home would be best. "Jake, I'm not sure how the real world works, but you do realize we both look physically very similar in age now. So I'm not worried about what people may think, so why is there a problem?" Jacob paused a second, thinking about that. There had been numerous times he and Nessie had discussed who truly was physically or mentally older, her or him. You would think a future chieftain would know all the ins and outs of everything, Quileute. Sometimes he could get such a migraine thinking about the aging process both he and Nessie shared. He really wished someone would write a book about it, it would make understanding it so much easier. "Okay, I suck at words. I know. You're getting frustrated, and that's the last thing I wanted. All I meant was, would you mind being my Disney girlfriend, at least for today?" Renesmee was about to get up to tell the pilot to turn the plane around. That was it. Disney was the worst place on earth and she no longer wanted to go. How dare Jacob label her a friend that is a girl, as if she would be lumped in some pool of Jacob's friends. Oh no, that was not going to be the case. Jacob was confused. He thought this would be one of those moments where breathing stopped, hearts fluttered, things like those movies always showed. Loss. Thing he expected to see was anger growing even more in Ness. Come on Ness, why are you so mad right now? I thought you'd be okay with being my girlfriend, I mean Disney girlfriend of course. Renesmee just shook her head in disgust. I think I'm more than just a friend that happens to be a girl, Jacob. We've been through just a tad more than to label our relationship like that. And why are you smiling, you jerk? Renesmee was now pouting at that stupid beautiful smile of his and the effect it had on her. I love you, you know that. Renesmee rolled her eyes. Well, I sure don't feel like that right now. I think you owe me an apology. Once again arms were folded and now she was looking back out the window. Jacob couldn't help smiling at her reaction. Once again, in their world, this kind of labeling really didn't come into play. There was a soulmate, husband, wife, and that was pretty much it. They had never really talked about labels since those labels were all they ever knew. Renesmee. Girlfriend does not mean what you think it means. Jacob leaned back a little as Nessie angrily turned towards him, getting right in his face. Oh, I know exactly what that means. I'm not a little girl anymore, Jacob. As if to prove her point, she gently lifted her folded arms, causing her breasts to stick out a little more. I definitely know you're not a little girl anymore, Ness. Jacob kept his eyes focused on hers. But in the human world, boyfriend-girlfriend is actually a title given to two people that are falling in love and want to take the next step from just being friends. Well, that's a stupid name for it, and I hate to break it to you, Jake, but we've been more than friends since the newborn attack. Renesmee dared him to object. This was what made it difficult for Jacob. Nessie had no filter, no reserves when it came to their relationship. Which in their own little universe was fine, their people would understand her meaning when she said something like that. However, in the human world, someone saying they were more than just friends would always assume an intimate relationship. Even that word, intimate, would mean something different to Nessie than it would to the real world. I understand, Ness, and you're right. But we're going to be in the human world and humans won't be able to understand what we go through. That's why, to make it easier on us, I just thought it would be best to be girlfriend and boyfriend today. If you don't want to be my girlfriend, that's fine, but I just wanted to be prepared. This just made her more agitated. You know, mister, you really are getting in more and more trouble. Don't think I don't know what you're doing. Jacob just gave her the innocent look, shrugging his shoulders. You're putting me in a no-win situation. If I don't accept your ultimatum, then you won't define our relationship and will probably freak out every time we touch today. If I do accept you as my boyfriend, then I have to settle for a title that is unbecoming our true relationship. Renesmee took his hand once again, the darn disconnect from Jacob too strong to keep ignoring. Man, my head really hurts right now. I think I liked it better when we could just be Jacob and Nessie. Jacob realized too late his mistake as he felt the hand pull back once again, but this time he wasn't giving it up so easy. Once again, what you think I meant is not what I meant. Whatever happened to our easy communication? Why is it so difficult to talk to each other now? Nessie would let the remark about, liked it better, to slide. She knew what Jacob meant. And this was starting to just scratch away at her nerves. Fine, I will be your Disney girlfriend, but only for today. Once we get home, then we will have another conversation. Oh boy, can't wait for that, Jacob sarcastically thought. So Disney girlfriend it is. Jacob smiled, seeing Nessie sigh and turn around, looking back out the window. He never thought asking Nessie to be his girlfriend would have been this difficult. Maybe the next part would cheer her up as he reached under his seat to put them on. Hey Nessie. Jacob laughed, hearing her loud sigh. Yes, Jacob. Do you like my ears? Renesmee was confused. Of course she loved every part of Jacob. Why would he even? She almost burst out in laughter as she turned to face him. It wasn't every day you see a very large Quileute man wearing a set of Mickey ears. Renesmee did all she could to keep in her laughter, but it was really becoming too hard. I really hate you right now, Jacob Black. I really do. Jacob just shrugged his shoulders. It's a gift, I know. And then they both laughed, finally getting back to where they both needed to be. Renesmee knew within 5 minutes of entering the park why it was so important for Jacob to label their relationship, at least for today. They had asked a park member to take a picture of them both in front of the beautiful gardens at the entrance, and the first words out of the member's mouth was how adorable they both looked together. Renesmee remembered the look of adoration on the person's face as Jake asked to take a picture of he and his girlfriend. Jacob told her the workers were supposed to always be cheery, but the older lady looked like she really did think her and Jake were adorable. Being Jacob's Disney girlfriend was definitely a lot better than what she thought it was going to be. They were just entering Main Street when Renesmee knew she had stepped into heaven. With her heightened senses, the smell of chocolate, baked goods, cinnamon, just invaded her entire body. If the wonderful smells weren't enough, seeing the entire length of the street lined with shops of every kind almost made her jump out of her skin. She would have been happy if all they did was shop all day at Main Street. Sorry, Jacob yelled as he waved an apologetic hand to the unfortunate people in the trolley being pulled by a now frantic horse. Jacob had been so enthralled with being on Main Street with Nessie that he forgot to get out of the way of the trolley being pulled by a giant horse. As one could imagine, horses were not too fond of giant wolves, and being surprised by one of the biggest wolves, the Disney horse freaked out. Note to self, steer clear of the Disney wildlife. Jacob saw down the street that someone was able to get the horse under control. Thank goodness it wasn't crowded yet, being it just opened. What? Jacob looked over at Nessie, who had an evil grin plastered on her face. How was I to know horses wouldn't like me? Renesmee, seeing that everyone was fine on the runaway trolley, decided to pull Jacob along to get their picture taken on Main Street with the beautiful castle behind them. She figured they could look in the shops later in the day. After the second and third pictures of the day and only being in the park for 10 minutes, Jacob wondered if that would be what they would do the rest of the day. Not like they hadn't taken pictures before. The minute Nessie saw the pictures from the park opening, she seemed to be on a mission to get as many pictures of them as possible. Not exactly his favorite thing to do at Disney, but it definitely made Nessie happy. So first ride. How about Buzz Lightyear? Jacob was hoping to distract her from all the picture taking to actually go on a ride. Renesmee, after having yet another picture of the taken right under the castle, decided to let Jacob have some fun. Sure, sounds fun. After getting off the ride, Renesmee was practically begging to go back on and ride again, but she could see Jacob was a little upset. She bounced up next to him, wrapping herself in his arm as she gave him a kiss on the cheek. She knew he was a little mad because he didn't help her kiss him by leaning over a bit. Jacob wouldn't look at her. Honey, I'm sorry I beat you, but I'm sure your laser gun was just broken. Of course Renesmee knew that wasn't the truth, but obviously Jacob's need to be the galactic hero and only getting Space Cadet was not sitting well. Oh, Jacob knew what Nessie was doing. Yeah, he might have talked the big game going into the ride, but the way she was strutting around after beating him in the game was borderline Emmetish. He gave her an evil look. She was definitely gonna pay for that. Sweetie, Jacob was pouring it on now as he pointed towards one of his favorite rides. Look, it's a kid's rocket ride through space. It's a lot like the one we just went on. Renesmee looked over towards where Jacob was pointing. The Space Mountain looked like a fun ride. She wondered if they kept score too. Come on, Jake. This will be fun. She pulled Jacob towards the ride, not noticing his evil grin. I hate you so much. Renesmee barely made it out of the ride as her screaming had finally stopped. Her hair was everywhere and she looked like she had been run through a drying machine. Are you saying you don't like roller coasters? Jacob picked her up in his arms, twirling her around. He got her back for the Buzz Lightyear fiasco. Renesmee was in quite the dilemma. There had been times in the past where she had faced danger, been scared, but something about hurling through dark space, twisting and turning, scared her to death. Of course, having her mate laughing at her, while she screamed the whole time, didn't help either. However, if the result of the torture was to be held like this in Jacob's arms, with the biggest smile on his face was the consequence, then she would ride the Space Mountain 100 times more. Jacob, people are staring. Renesmee easy. Lee picked up on all the people now looking at them with smiles on their faces. Jacob looked around and noticed the smiles too, as they had garnered quite the crowd. He heard a small child say in the crowd, "Look mommy. It's Beauty and the Beast." Jacob gently put Renesmee down, realizing a giant russet-skinned man with a beautiful pale-skinned princess twirling in his arms probably did look quite interesting. "What are you doing?" Renesmee was a little perturbed. Jacob would put her down. "I thought you said you were embarrassed." Jacob looked at her, hearing the sighs from the crowd as their impromptu Beauty and the Beast reenactment came to an end. Renesmee slapped Jacob's shoulder. "I said people are staring, I didn't say put me down." "Sorry." Jacob lowered his head in mock defeat. Renesmee gave him a quick kiss. "So what tamer ride do you want to do next?" Jacob evilly grinned to himself. "How about we ride the nice little teacup ride?" At least that sounded more like a kiddie ride to Renesmee. After all, how scary could teacups be? "Okay, come on boyfriend. We have a lot more to do. Blank. The one thing Renesmee learned about being Jack's Disney girlfriend was that her boyfriend had a whole new side to him that she had never seen. Jake was of course always fun to be around, but she had rarely ever seen him just let go. Of course, being the focal point of every supernatural being in the universe had a tendency to keep one on edge. But she loved seeing Jacob like this, carefree, happy, and relaxed. Another part to her Disney boy friend was that he was quite the deceiver. Apparently teacups was not a ride kids ride where you enjoy tea with Alice, especially when you have the strongest man in the universe manning the turn wheel. Also, the haunted house was not a kids ride, and Splash Mountain was where you actually did get wet. All little tidbits that she really shouldn't have trusted her boyfriend to be honest about. Of course, thinking back to Splash Mountain, them both getting drenched actually worked in her favor. Seeing Jacob in his water-soaked shirt. "Hey Ness, you gotta try these." Jacob held out two very enticing cinnamon stick things. "They're called churros and they are one of my favorites." Renesmee quickly woke from her, Jacob's wearing a wet t-shirt dream, and smelled the delicious scent of cinnamon and sugar with a hint of fresh baked dough. She grabbed one of the churros as Jake called them and took a bite. "Oh my god, these are so good." Renesmee closed her eyes as she held the churro close to her mouth, savoring the wonderful taste. She opened her eyes to see Jacob staring strangely at her. "What? Did I spill something?" Renesmee tried to wipe the sides of her mouth, licking her fingers slowly. Enjoying the cinnamon sugar still left there. Jacob finally snapped out of it, adding one more reason that churros was his favorite. "Sorry, but yeah, they're pretty good, aren't they?" Renesmee could see something was off with Jacob. Once again his cheeks had taken on a darker tint that his chocolate brown eyes had followed too. Odd how her eating something would cause a similar reaction to when he saw her in her training outfit or when they kissed. She'd file that away for later use. Maybe do a little more research at the moment though. Renesmee, never breaking eye contact with Jake, guided his hand that was still holding his half-eaten churro to her mouth as she took a slow bite, closing her eyes and letting out a slight moan as she tasted the sweetness again. So good. Renesmee opened her eyes seeing Jake's faraway look again. She smiled, thinking it sure looked like he was somewhere else. Yep, she was filing this eating thing away for future use. Also note to hers elf that she was going to stock up on churros when they got back home, and not just because she enjoyed the taste. Jacob really wished his body would listen to his mind more and not just his heart. Or maybe that should be the other way around, but this woman was crumbling every bit of resolve he had left. He was quickly wondering if Disney had a magical spell over everyone inside because he had never felt like this, ever. He really wondered if his eyes were glowing blue because it felt like he was seeing Nessie in a whole new light. It was wonderful and scary all at the same time because he could feel his heart and mind doing an epic battle of their own, and he just hoped the noble, good intent one would win. He was not expecting the changing feelings to hit him like this, but they were, and he wasn't even sure if he wanted to fight them. "Come on Jake, let's ride the pirate ride." Renesmee reached up and kissed her speechless boyfriend as she guided him along the crowd. Sure. Wah. All Jacob could muster as he realized both churros were now gone. He actually didn't even remember tasting any of them. Blank. It was nighttime and the park would be closing soon. Renesmee realized this was absolutely the best day of her life. It might not have started out wonderfully with the whole boyfriend-girlfriend thing, but it definitely was wonderful now. There was only one moment that she would like to forget, and it really wasn't her fault. They had gone to get a picture with the beast, which was pretty funny considering her beast was just as big as the beast in the castle. The small crowd even laughed seeing how her Jacob equaled the beast in stature. If they only knew, she remembered thinking. That wasn't the problem though. When they went to get a picture with Belle was when things got a little tense. But it wasn't really her fault. Of course Renesmee knew that these were just normal humans playing roles as her beloved characters because her Belle would never have done this to her. Renesmee had only experienced bits and pieces of jealousy. She remembered back during the moment when she didn't want Jake to see her feed, and saw how her mom touched Jake. Yeah, that was the first moment she knew what jealousy was. But what she felt when the Belle imposter got a little handsy with Jake. She was thankful she accidentally projected to Jake. Because it would have ruined a very good trip if she followed through with her bleeding dry of the imposter. Luckily Jake felt the projection and snatched her up before anything could happen. Renesmee's only satisfaction was seeing the look of terror on the imposter's face as a growl came from inside Renesmee that rivaled her boyfriend's growl. Sorry again for the Belle incident, Jake. Renesmee led closer into Jake as they waited for the fireworks show. They were standing right in front of the castle, her back securely nestled into Jake's chest as he had his arms wrapped around her, his head resting comfortably on her shoulder. Her whole body reacted as Jacob's voice reverberated throughout her. No worries, Ness. I mean, I knew you wouldn't have really done those things you projected, but it was a little inappropriate of the way she grabbed my Jake. Let's not talk about that, please. Renesmee did not like the anger boiling up in her again. They of course had a strict telling the truth policy. But she figured leaving out the part that her projection was a 100% accurate would be best. Jacob kissed the side of her cheek. Did you have fun today? Renesmee closed her eyes and projected to Jacob just how much today meant to her. Yeah, me too. Best day ever. Jacob smiled as he saw the lights to the castle change as the show was ready to begin. I heard this is supposed to be pretty good. Renesmee gave him one last kiss as the show started, the voice booming through the speakers signaling the start of the show. Renesmee was always one to pay attention to the littlest things. It helped her to learn as much as she did, as fast as she could, in every situation. It had a lot to do with her abilities and the way her body compensated for the rapid growth by allowing her to see and sense things that most would miss. While the pageantry and the beautiful display of all her beloved Disney movies on the castle in a wonderful montage was incredible, it was the words of the inspirational theme song that wound its way into her heart. The words spoke to her in a way that caused a significant change in her. It wasn't a small change but a groundbreaking life-altering change, and it all had to do with her feelings toward Jake. No longer was there this childhood crush or her teenage musings. What was happening now as the words from the song engulfed her, comforted her, changed her. This was no small change. No growth spurt, no boom. What was happening to her as she stood there, held in the arms of the man who was her everything, was truly magical. She closed her eyes, tending to the words as if the song itself was written for her and Jake. Ready to begin, let the wonder take hold. She thought about when they first saw each other, when the imprint happened. Spark a dream that were meant to follow. Setting off for a new tomorrow. She remembered her own dream, and how that started a whole new tomorrow. Diving in with our hearts wide open. The story comes alive, when we look inside. She thought of their own story and how it came alive every day of their lives. It's just beginning. Feel your heart beat faster. That definitely was her. Reach out and find your happily ever after. This is what kept playing over and over in her mind. Find your happily ever after. Renesmee ignored the rest of the show even as Tinkerbell flew overhead. The only thing she cared about was that yes, she did find her happily ever after. She turned around looking up in Jake's eyes. She knew he found it too as there was no mistaking the look in his eyes now. They had both found everything they had ever been waiting for, and it was right there in each other's arms. The fireworks, the lights, the sounds all disappeared as it was only Jacob and Renesmee, holding each other in a lover's embrace. Renesmee never was more sure about anything in her life as she reached both arms up around Jacob's head as she pulled him to her. There was no hesitation, there was no thinking at all. This was right. This was meant to be as their lips touched for the first time as so much more than anything they were ever before. Renesmee felt like the world was spinning as she closed her eyes. Yes, and took in everything that was Jacob. She knew before when they would kiss on the lips, Jake was always holding back. It was always magical and wonderful, but there was always hesitation. Not now. Not in this moment, as they both poured out their love and happiness at finally being together, in a kiss. Jacob knew in this moment there was no going back. It didn't matter logistics of age, of growth charts, anything like that. What was happening now as he kissed the love of his life was just right. There was no reservation, no hesitation, no worrying about what this might mean. They had been teetering on an enormous shift in their relationship lately, and the other stuff would have to be figured out. But in this moment, with Renesmee in his arms, kissing her truly for the first time, everything was right. The two lovers stayed in their embrace as the show was over, the crowds dispersing. The ahs from the crowd did not deter them because it felt right. It wasn't a lustful kiss that old embarrassed the little ones around them. This was what a true love's kiss really looked like, and if they had looked around them, they would see that people were not disgusted at all. They were witnessing the same magic they had seen all day at Disney. To the crowd it just looked like another Disney love story. The two finally broke their kiss, the feeling still engulfing them in its warm embrace. As they brought their foreheads together. Perfect, was all Renesmee could squeak out as a lone tear streaked down her face. Perfect, Jacob responded, as he knew their lives would never be the same from this point on. This truly was the most magical place on earth. So what's going on, Jacob? Edward looked around the clearing, finding it odd Jacob brought him all the way out here, miles away from family and friends. At a previous point in time, Edward might have thought Jacob was trying to kill him. Jacob was shuffling his feet, thankful he wore his old smelly long-sleeve shirt and full-length loose-fitting sweatpants. Nessie didn't like these for some reason now, so he figured if he had to phase quickly, she wouldn't be upset with him for ruining another outfit. So as you may already know, Nessie's feelings for me have changed, been that way for a couple months. Edward started feeling really uncomfortable as he knew just how alone they were. His previous fleeting thought not so fleeting anymore. As we've all talked about before, Nessie and I have been really good about handling all the physical stuff. We've never been overly affectionate with each other beyond the normal, can't live without you. Can't breathe unless you're near me, those types of things. Edward realized now why they were here alone. Jacob still wouldn't look over at Edward, kicking at the dirt in the ground. Crap, sorry. Didn't mean to do that. Jacob felt bad looking down at the crater-size hole he just kicked in the dirt. Ignoring the obvious hole in the ground, Edward knew there was no use fighting it. Bella already explained to him the night he asked her to marry him that this is a different era. That youth nowadays were more free and open about their relationships. As much as he hated it, his daughter's body was quickly catching up to her maturity level. Carlisle had informed him about this a couple weeks ago. It was time to face the music as he knew his daughter's innocence would be taken. He just hated the fact he had to now talk to Jacob about that. Look, Jake, I don't. Edward, I would like to ask if it's okay to start courting your daughter. Jacob interrupted. Edward almost fell backwards. Wait, what did you just ask? Jacob looked at Edward, an honesty in his eyes. I would like to get permission to start courting your daughter. I understand that we will not be able to be as physical with each other. And I understand rules and curfews will be strict, but I'm willing to do that to earn the right to court your daughter. Now Edward was always pretty good at reading people. Of course, having the mind-reading ability helped really quick to establish someone's intent. He had a near-flawless record when it came to predicting people's behaviors and reactions. What he wasn't prepared for was what Jacob was asking him, the way he was asking, and the heartfelt intent behind it. This man was being completely truthful, and for once Edward had no words. Jacob mistook the silence for reluctance. I know it's going to be difficult considering Nessie and I are always together, but this means a lot to me. I want to do this the right way. Edward, still stunned, was able to at least form a question. Why, Jacob? Jacob stopped his rambling as he looked Edward in the eyes. Because it's Nessie. Edward was looking for any sign of deceit, he couldn't find an ounce. Those are just my beliefs. Her mom, as you well know, does not share those beliefs. Look, I may have hated you in the beginning for being the blood-sucking vampire that was ripping the soul out of the one I loved, but for being a father, I've never respected someone more. And I want to do this for Nessie, to let her know just how much I love and respect not only her, but her father. Edward knew Jasper must be nearby because that was the only thing that could explain the way he was feeling. Jacob, as much as I respect that and want that, you and Nessie aren't like anyone else. Jacob cautiously approached Edward, but don't you see? That's why this is so important to me. Everyone, including Nessie and I knew from the start that we'd be together. I felt like her choice was taken from her. Well, not her choice, because as we know, she's made it very clear what her choice is. But I want her to know that I do not take our relationship for granted, never have. I mean, we haven't really had the talk about making everything official. And that is one of the reasons I wanted to do this right, because I want her to realize that this was a very important step in the evolution of our relationship. Edward really had to see a therapist, realizing he was actually trying to talk Jacob into not courting his daughter. Darn Bella and her evil ways. Jacob, there might be a problem. Jacob quickly looked around the clearing, readying himself to phase if needed. He knew Edward's abilities, and if he said there was a problem, then he was ready to fight side by side with his future father-in-law. No, nothing like that. I'm talking about Renesmee. Are you sure she won't think, at least in the beginning, you're asking her to marry her instead of just dating her? I'm not sure if she is going to hint that you haven't been dating already. Wow, he had a good point, Jacob realized. Good point. I need to be careful how I word this to her. I'm pretty sure she'll be okay with this, we'll just need to explain the process to her. Edward shook his head, placing a hand on Jacob's arm. So the girl who has been dreaming about marrying you and starting a family with you since pretty much the day she was born. You know, the one willing to starve herself just so you wouldn't leave her. The one who is finally entering womanhood, with her hero for an eternal mate, is going to want to wait to get married. And this was why he needed to talk to Edward. The man did have some very valid points. I'm going to do this, it means a lot to me. Jacob tried to convince himself. His confidence nowhere close to what it was before the meeting. And this time, not because of Edward. Good luck, Jacob, you're going to need it. Blank, _ blank. Cullen's main house. I'm so proud of you, sweetie. Alice hugged Renesmee close. Giddy with excitement over the news about Renesmee and Jacob, it was so exciting. Renesmee was still on cloud nine that, finally, Jacob and her could move to a real, adult relationship. Aunt Alice, you should have seen Jacob. He was so nervous, but such the gentleman. He showed so much respect to Mom and Dad. I just love him so much. Alice could see the absolute adoration in her niece's eyes. She couldn't be happier because that meant another wedding was to come. Matter of fact, a courtship party may be a good idea. Yeah, grats, little one. Emmett came by, kissing the side of her head. Kudos to the both of you for waiting on the good stuff. I know I could never do that. Alice slapped her bigger brother. Renesmee gave Emmett a dirty look. He was always a rebel. Emmett, you may like breaking the law, but Jacob is an honorable man, and the law is the law. Emmett stopped in his tracks. What does that mean? What law are you talking about? Renesmee smiled. Sometimes Uncle Emmett just didn't get it. Jacob and Dad told me the law of courtship. For two people who are in love and want to start dating and eventually get married, they need to follow that law. Emmett looked to Alice, who was shaking her head no. He ignored her like always. Sweetie, that ain't no law, and if it was, 90% of the population would be in jail by now. Renesmee stood up, looking Emmett in the eyes. That's not true. Jacob told me, and Dad agreed that there needed to be a courtship. And Dad told me the main part of the law to abide by is I'm not allowed to consummate our relationship until we're married. Renesmee folded her arms across her chest, expecting Emmett to take back what he just said. There is no way Dad and Jacob would lie about this, although Mom never said anything one way or the other. Sorry, little one, this is the 21st century, there ain't no law on the books for that stuff. Matter of fact, in Washington, the law of consenting age is 16. So according to that law, you and your wolf should have already been. Emmett quickly left the room, hearing a slight growl come from Alice. Oh sweetie, don't listen to your uncle, he's just acting like a horny teenager that doesn't know any better. Alice was standing next to Renesmee, putting her arm around her for some comfort, reminding herself how much she was going to beat the crap out of Emmett. Renesmee could not help the anger starting to build inside her. 16. Was her uncle serious? Why was everyone always telling her 18 as if that was even measurable in her situation? Renesmee would have to find out more about that. After all, they were talking about marriage, which she assumed meant when the other thing could happen. At least according to the two most important men in her life. Renesmee knew her aunt would tell her the truth. Aunt Alice, did you wait till you were married? Oh no. I'm sorry honey, I just had a vision. I need to go talk to Rosalie. Renesmee grabbed her aunt's arm. I know your vision looks. And that wasn't one of them. What aren't you telling me? Was Emmett right? Renesmee was really starting to get frustrated. Sweetie, that is something you need to take up with your father and Jacob. I cannot get in the middle of this. Renesmee was now angry. Oh, I'm going to take it up with them, all right. Blank. Back at the cottage, Jacob and Edward were sitting down together. Well, that went a lot better than I thought. Jacob looked nervously over to Edward, who had a nervous look of his own. Yeah, she took that pretty well. Edward nervously looked to the door. Oh crap. Sorry Jacob, I need to run. Edward took off through the back door, getting a full reading of what was in Alice's head. Okay, Jacob thought, looking at the empty space where his future father-in-law just sat. Odd time to just leave, but Jacob figured he would go find Nessie. They needed to hunt anyway, so might as well do it now. He got up and ran to the door, which exploded off its hinges as Nessie stood in the doorway. Hi honey. Jacob let out a whimper as he stared down his hopefully still future mate. Where's Edward? You mean your father? Jacob tried to add a sacredness to his voice at the mention of father. For some reason, his instincts told him to do it. I mean Edward. But that's okay, I will deal with him later. You, however, I'll deal with now. One thing Jacob noticed with Nessie maturing was she was a lot more aggressive. He had talked to Sam if it had anything to do with the imprint, and Sam told him it might have something to do with being the mate of the true alpha. He reminded himself to pursue this further, but for now, he had to deal with his alpha. I don't suppose now is a good time to go on a date. Jacob had to try. You'll be lucky if we ever go on a date. Okay, Renesmee didn't mean that at all, but she really hated how she could build up so much anger and only have it evaporate spending 1 minute with Jacob. Especially when he was the source of that anger. She really had to talk to the chieftains about this imprint law. Apparently the part of doing anything to make the imprintee happy was not at all accurate. To our spot now, Renesmee linked, trying to add as much anger as she could. Jacob lifted both hands in surrender. Okay, let me get myself, as some chaperones, after all, that is the law. Renesmee had to squeeze her nails into her hand, not to run over there and punch him. He was the friendliest when she needed a friend, the strongest when she needed a protector, and apparently the comedian when she was angry. Renesmee pointed to the opening where the door used to be. Jacob lowered his head as he walked toward the opening, bending down really quick to give her a peck on the cheek, and then he ran phasing in mid-form. Sorry, habit. Renesmee pinched the bridge of her nose, already feeling a headache coming on. This was going to be a long courtship. I know you're here, Dad. And you have some explaining to do. But don't worry, I'll be home by 11, as the law states. Then we can have a nice long talk. Renesmee turned and sped off, not seeing the biggest smile on her mom's face, who was shielding her husband more out of fear for his life than anything else. Their spot. First of all, this is not the way I had thought the beginning of our courtship would go. The last part said with a bit of sarcasm. Is courtship even a real thing? Renesmee added. All right, fun time was over, as Jacob had already phased back to human form, putting on his shorts. Before even entering the clearing. It was time to be adults now, no matter how much his inner self wanted to hide behind a mask of comedy and immaturity. Actually, it's very real, and something your father cherished very much. Then why did Uncle Emmett say it's not a law? Well, he's right, it's not a law now, but during your father's time, it was very much adhered to as if it was a law. I don't understand, Jacob, why do I feel like I've been deceived? I've never been that angry, you saw what I did to that door, the way I acted, that's just not me. Well, okay, not me when your life isn't in danger. Renesmee had to laugh at the irony there. Look, Nessie, you're a growing woman, protected and isolated from the real world, learning everything you know from supernatural beings. Normal is completely different than anyone else's. I just don't see why we have to have rules, Jake. We promised when I came of consenting age we would do this, so why can't we just get married now and start our family? Jacob had to wonder where she heard the part about consenting. They were supposed to be discussing dating, not the other thing. Because I want you to see just how important you are to me. You mean by not actually being with me? Jake gave her a frustrated look. Not fair. I mean, look back at our life, starting from your first memory of us. When I heard your voice. And I wanted you near me in Mom's stomach. Yes, exactly. Now could you be with me, let me hold you? No, I had to wait till I was born. The Christmas present, the promise bracelet. Did I tell you all the promises up front? No, you made me wait each Christmas. Were you mad you had to wait? No, I was excited. But I'm going to stop you right there. Time may not be relative to me. But I'm not waiting another year for us to get married. I'm sorry, Jake, I will do whatever you want me to do, but I'm not waiting that long. If you're doing this to show me how much I mean to you, then you can stop right now. I know how important I am to you because you've showed me that every day of my life. A courtship is not going to make a difference to me. Jacob reached up his hand to her face. But it will to me. Renesmee shook her head again, that headache was starting to come back. So this courtship is about your feelings, not mine. Nessie, how do you even know what your feelings are now? You just came of age like a few weeks ago. Are you serious right now, Jacob? What? I've counted down every second of every day since the newborn attack. Every second, Jacob, it was agonizing for me. Every single checkbox I had in my head for the perfect mate, you blew them all away and you didn't have to do anything but just be you. I am so infatuated with you that for the past year, every day I long for sleep. The minute I woke I couldn't wait till night to go back to sleep, and you want to know why? Because that was the time I could truly be with you, with our family in my dreams. Wow, Jacob was stunned. Hey, I'm sorry. Let me finish, and so help me God, do not start apologizing. We made a promise, remember? Renesmee blew a stray bronze curl from her reddening face. Okay. Jacob just hung his head. Oh God, please help me from wanting to kiss this man so much right now. What are you smiling about? You were projecting. Renesmee pinched the bridge of her nose. Yep, headache. Jacob, do you want to marry me? Jacob held up his hands. Whoa, there is no way I'm letting you propose to me. I have this whole elaborate proposal plan and I will shut up now. And yes, I do want to marry you. Proposal plan, Renesmee thought, her knees suddenly becoming very weak. She looked at him, forgetting for the moment what her thought pattern was going to be with this conversation. Oh yes, future eternal mates. Do you want to start a family with me? Well, I mean someday. Yes or no, Jacob, not talking timelines here. Jacob replied, yes. Do you think I'm attractive? Jacob shot his head up to look her right in the eyes. Damn right I do. The force of his answer nearly knocked her off her feet, figuratively and literally. Do you love me? Of course, Nessie. This time Renesmee walked up to him, placing a hand on each side of his cheek. Then why are we waiting? Jacob sighed, grabbing both her hands in his, because it felt right for me to do this, Nessie. I don't know. Maybe it's me wanting to do this for your dad, maybe it's me wanting to honor traditions of old, maybe it's me wanting to get a sense of normalcy and prove to myself that our story at its core is just about a boy who loves a girl. Jacob suddenly became very solemn at this next point. Renesmee felt it too as she took a step closer to Jacob, wrapping her arms around him, arching her back so she could still look at him. Jacob breathed in Nessie's scent, gathering strength from her as he looked her in the eyes. And Ness, I'm just not going to be the one to stop us. I'm not going to fight these feelings any longer. I'm not putting up walls, I'm not going to treat our attraction to each other as some kind of bad thing. With that said, I just want you to know that I want our first time really being together to be as husband and wife. Renesmee smiled, rubbing his back, trying her best to let him know it would be okay. But Jake, does a piece of paper really make a difference? I understand in the real world why someone would want to wait, but you know, and I know that we will be together, we are bound already, and it just frustrates me a little that we need some worldly law to justify our love for one another. It's way beyond that, Jake, and you know it. Jake brought her closer, kissing her the way a man would kiss his soulmate, the way Jacob would kiss Nessie. Jake finally came up for air. Realizing that maybe Nessie did have a point and also realizing just how useless he would be even if he wanted to be in control. You're right, babe. All I ask is that we try. You deserve to be treated like a precious gift. Renesmee, luckily, was able to regain her senses from that amazing kiss to be able to truly take in what Jake just said. She kind of understood what Jake meant, because that kissing Jake did things to her that threw rationale completely out the window. She had nothing, not an ounce of self-control when it came to Jake and kissing him, feeling his touch. She had no fight against him. His love for her was almost as strong as her love for him. If this is what he wants and will make him happy, then she would do it. Okay, listen, Jake. I will only let this courtship go for a few months max. If by then you have not followed through on your proposal plan, and make sure the world knows I'm yours, then I will take matters into my own hands. And trust me, Jake, my father would not approve. Oh boy. Well, the courtship hadn't really gone according to anyone's plan, and the main pain point, the one obstacle of the entire courtship concept, was the powerful and beautiful hybrid. Renesmee had it. She was done. Renesmee was in her room in the main house with Rose and Leah, all of them sitting on her bed, cross-legged, talking with one another. Jacob and Seth were training some younglings who had just recently phased down at the res. So that left the rest of the pack to sit in Renesmee's room, listening to her frustrations. I'm done. I'm so over this courtship. Renesmee was holding her pillow in her lap, gaining little comfort from hugging it tightly to her. Jacob's scent was nowhere to be found, because of course he always being the gentleman. He would not even take a nap in her bed with her. It never dawned on her even when she was a child that they never really played in her room. It was always outside or in the general playroom. Even when he slept over, he never stayed with her in her bed. It really sucked when she matured from a child and realized how having Jacob in bed with her, using the "she just needed comfort" excuse would have been really nice. But nope, good old noble Jacob wouldn't even do that. She resorted to many tricks of the trade to try to have him with her while she slept. The couch or chairs were fine, eggs. PT while going to sleep was blissful in his arms. She always woke up alone, in her bed, and that sucked. Even when she kept stealing his pillows from Papa Black's house, eventually he caught on, and sked if he could please just use one pillow for himself so he didn't have to keep getting used to a new pillow every time. She did feel bad that she had blamed Quill and Embry for stealing his pillows, saying that they were just being teenagers. But they did recover quickly from their injuries. Still though, she felt bad. But Jacob could have found out where his pillows kept disappearing to if he would have just slept one time in her bed. But nope. And now, that he had every right to share her bed, the darn courtship got in the way. It was worse now than even growing up. She was the imprintee, and she'd be darned if she was happy right now. Honey. Rose placed a loving hand over her niece's, seeing her struggling so much with the stupid idea of courtship that her brother and her alpha, Jax, had conjured up. You do realize it's only been a few weeks, right? Renesmee blew out a quick breath, sending one of her stray bronze curls out of her face. That's how bad it was. Jacob hadn't even done her hair lately and she wasn't exactly in the mood to doll herself up, as Aunt Alice would say. It's been hell for me, Rose. He won't even touch me without acting like he needs permission from Dad first. Do you realize? We have yet to French kiss. The other day when we were joking around, we both stuck our tongues out at each other with our heads touching. Renesmee had to pause, thinking of how absolutely amazing that felt when their tongues touched. It was so quick, so unexpected, but to her it felt like her body melted into a big pile of goo. That connection meant the world to me, but looking at Jacob, you'd have thought he just killed a puppy. Rose had to hold in a laugh, picturing exactly how that must have played out. You guys have always talked about this kind of stuff though. Why is he acting like this now? I mean, you planned this next step out ad nauseam. This is exactly what got her so mad. Exactly. But the courtship thing has just gotten everything out of whack. I understand what my sweetheart is doing and the why. Even in her frustrated state, her heart still swelled thinking of what Jacob was trying to do. But he seems to forget that we've kind of been in a courtship since the newborn attack. Renesmee, her determination building. I just want to marry him. Why does he keep fighting this simple concept? Leah really was in a tough spot. She had to support her Alphas, and that was pretty tough to do when both had such differing points of view. Renesmee had always gravitated more towards her, most likely having to do with the fact Leah had known Jacob from when they were babies. Renesmee always wanted to hear stories of Jacob, and while Leah would never admit it to Jacob, she actually enjoyed talking about how close Seth, Jacob, and she was growing up. That's also one reason the idea of courtship didn't surprise her when it came to Jacob. Considering him growing up around the sex-crazed teenage wolves that he ran with, Jacob was always different. She knew it had a lot to do with his mom, and him wanting to honor her. Also, having older sisters, Jacob just always was such a gentleman around the opposite sex. Of course, that also made him even more desirable for the women, well, anyone that met him. That was one reason she was so surprised when he tried to kiss Bella. He sulked about doing that for so long, that she thought he was going to combust. Leah remembered trying to explain to him that it was more than just him trying to kiss Bella, he was trying to save her. While his execution was flawed, his intent was very noble. But here she was, seeing the struggle between her alphas, and she really didn't know how to handle it correctly. Of course, she'd be there for her best friend, whatever Renesmee needed, she'd be there. But this was tough. Renesmee could sense Leah in deep thought. "What are you thinking, Leah?" "I was just thinking of what Jacob must be going through." Renesmee saddened a bit. Leah was right, here she'd been worried about herself and her feelings. But she didn't look at it necessarily from the struggling part that Jacob might be going through. "Listen, sis, I do understand what your frustrations are. But we've talked about Jacob's upbringing and how important it is to him that he treats you the way his mom would want him to. I think he's still scared though, Renesmee." Renesmee had to gather herself, thinking of Jacob's mom. She had no doubt from the first moment Jake talked about her that they would have gotten along. She never met Mama Black, but she missed her as if she'd known her all her life. Renesmee wanted so bad to just be able to talk to her, and she knew they both would be able to convince Jacob that he didn't have to do this. But Leah, why would he be scared? I believe I've proven to him what my devotion is to him. Both Leah and Rose knew that was surely the case as they nodded in agreement. Still, Leah wasn't quite sure how to explain it. It's not that he's scared of your commitment. He knows you are committed to him. He's known you were the one for, well, let's face it, since you were born. Rose added, "Trust me, Jax knows. Just thank God he didn't sulk around here wondering if he was good enough for you. Or if you'd choose him. He's always known no one could love you, care for you, or protect you more than him. Imprint law or not, he would fight for you with all he had." "Exactly, Aunt Rose. So why are we not married yet?" Leah was sort of hesitant to go down this route, but she felt Renesmee needed to hear it. "Renesmee, when did you really know Jacob was the one? I know you've known you would never leave him. But when did you really know and understand he'd be your eternal mate?" "Easy, it was few months after the newborn attack when it really hit me what losing him would mean. I didn't know all the adult stuff at that time, but I knew then that no other man would be my mate. It was Jacob or nothing." "Okay, so that's when you knew, and it didn't bother you thinking of him as your mate from that point on, right? I mean, even as you matured and understood what being mated with Jacob meant, you still wanted him." Renesmee looked shyly down at her bracelet. "More than you could ever know. But now look at it from Jacob's point of view. He knew you were the one from the moment he saw you. Yes, the imprint kicked everything off, but he knew. But here's the thing, Renesmee. He could never fully see you as his eternal mate. Saying it is one thing, but completely feeling it is another." Renesmee looked confused at her. "But Leah, we always talked about it. Jacob never did anything to make me feel uncomfortable. He was everything to me. Is everything to me. And that everything really comforted you, didn't it? Of course. Don't you see, Renesmee, you couldn't be everything to Jacob at first. He didn't have the luxury of feeling the way you did. You were his little princess, remember? I mean, Nessie, the way he talked about you to everyone, you were like his daughter, his most precious gift. But you weren't his everything because you couldn't be at that young age, he just wouldn't allow it." This was yet again frustrating for her, remembering back when she announced she wanted to marry him. Jacob explained it to her and she understood physically why. But she never had those walls. It was wanting all of Jacob all the time for her. "I mean, you do understand there had to be boundaries, right?" "Well, I understood from his point of view, yes, but from mine I still don't understand why there needed to be boundaries." Marriage is not just about having sex, right? But yet sex seems to always be the wall that has to be put up. I just don't get it. Why does it have to be so dirty? Leah looked to the only married one in the room. Rose was going to have to take this one. Rose had to chuckle. One thing you got with Renesmee was the unfiltered, unbiased, complete truth. You know, Renesmee, I honestly can't give you a reason that hasn't already been given. I do know what it's like to think you are doing things the right way, thinking you have the right man, only to have your world destroyed. Renesmee hurried over to her aunt, hugging her. I'm sorry, Rose. I didn't mean for you to bring that up. Rose patted her on the back, releasing their hug. Well, now that I did bring it up, I think that actually is an example, in theory, of why there is this stigma of waiting. It's not about marriage, it's about the one you're marrying. This was what Renesmee was trying to say. So now do you understand why I never understood waiting? I had the perfect man, I knew it, Mom knew it, Dad knew it. Even you knew it. Renesmee nudged her aunt playfully, wanting to quickly move from the topic of what happened to Rose when she was first engaged. That's why it's been a constant struggle to wait. I'll be honest, this is the one time no one can say if I knew then what I know now, because we all knew what Jacob would be like. So if Jacob and I would have just said we were not going to have sex before I came of age, and everyone knew it, would they have minded if we got married earlier? I don't think it's that simple though. Leah interjected. Think about it, Leah. So 18 is the human age to get married by law, laws we don't necessarily abide by anyway. Regardless though, so let's say I was 17 years, 11 months, and 30 days old, would it be taboo for Jacob and I to get married? Would one day really change everything? Well, no, but, so one day doesn't make a difference. What about 10 days? Would that be okay? 30 days, 3 months, a year? I mean, who puts this arbitrary number on when we should get married? This sounded so familiar to Rose. Her poor niece had been struggling with this for a while. And let's say it is all about the sex. I do get that in a way. Once again though, if my mate is the one I would die for, the one I would do anything for, then what would be the problem of the when? As long as my body was ready for him, then why would we need to wait? I just don't understand what made everything so awkward. But Renesmee, you do understand how unique your situation is though, right? I mean, love at first sight is rare enough. But what you and Jacob have is way beyond even that. So the world is accustomed to the pattern of behavior that men and women have shown throughout the years. Jacob and you are the exception, not the rule. Renesmee took a minute to think about things. She really hated the very act that could create such special gifts as the same act that can cause so many frustrations. She hated thinking about situations like Rosalie and the man that hurt her. But yet, thinking of her mom and dad, and just how perfect they are, and even Rosalie and Emmett now. She just had to resolve herself that she would never fully understand. For now though, she would just deal with what's in front of her. You're right, guys. And I'm sorry to complain about all this yet again. I just get so frustrated with Jacob and his need to be well perfect for me. I wish he could see himself through my eyes, know that he doesn't have to be perfect, he just has to be mine. Renesmee laughed as she looked at her pack. You know, if anything all of us has learned, it's that Jacob will do the right thing. He is perfect for you, and so why don't we just see where this goes? As always, let's put our faith in our Alpha. He will do what he always does, the right thing. It was then the three of them laughed, all along realizing that no words spoken could have been more truth. I love you guys so much, thanks for always having our backs. I know it can't be easy living in our little world. Renesmee hugged her pack close to her. You have no idea. Leah sarcastically responded. Renesmee was about to reply when the scent hit her, Jacob. She quickly jumped up out of bed, straightening her outfit, slightly bouncing on her feet as she knew it was seconds before her mate would come through the front door. You know, sometimes it really is sickening. Rose shook her head at her overly excited niece. Renesmee shrugged her shoulders. What can I say? It's a wolf thing. She winked at her pack as she heard the front door open. Gotta go. She quickly ran out the door to meet Jacob. Rose and Leah just looked at each other, a smirk on both their faces. I say a week. Leah laughed. I say 2 days. You're on. Rosie nudged Leah. Wanna train? Thought you'd never ask. At that the two warriors were off, hoping to get away from all the lovey-dovey stuff even though each knew they wouldn't want it any other way. Renesmee knew she had to act. They were already weeks into the courtship, and she really needed to talk to Jake. It had only been 2 days after talking with her pack girls and she needed to be with Jake BW. Ith him in every way possible because this was just not fair to her. Renesmee had to make sure the courtship thing was over. She understood the intent of what Jake was trying to do, but he had to really. He couldn't continue to just cut her off like this. She had established an addiction to him, his voice, his touch, his scent, his presence, and cutting her off, no matter how noble the cause, needed to stop. She may have had the power to starve herself from feeding, but no way could she continue to starve herself from Jacob. Yes, she understood Jake's reasoning for the courtship initially, but their relationship was so far beyond any earthly law that things needed to change, and they needed to do so immediately. Now here she was, standing on the steps to the main house, waiting for Jacob to come over. Since the courtship started, he had stayed at his old house, which now meant she didn't have the luxury of him being right there when she started the day. The only benefit, if there was one, was tea. Had all this free time allowed her to spend it getting ready for him. It was so tough with Jake though, because whether she had just woken up, hair everywhere, no makeup, disheveled clothes, he treated her like she was a princess on her coronation day. The moment she'd walk out of her room, she could see his expression, see the admiration in his eyes. He'd told her every day when he first saw her to start the day. It was like imprinting all over again. Of course, the problem with having the most sincere and loving man as your eternal mate is that sometimes she would forget that maybe it would be nice to dress up. Or, doll up, as Alice said for him. Being alone in the morning and night now meant there was more time to focus on those types of things, and while she knew she didn't have to, she wanted to look on the outside the way she imagined Jake saw her. Since the day in the shop, when she knew she was becoming a woman, she'd been hyper-aware of even the littlest changes in her body. She looked down at her chest. Some changes not so little. She definitely had physically become the woman she remembered in her vision. She was tall and athletic, of course her trainer and the image he had them on now had a lot to do with that. Her physique definitely reflected the work that they put in, but not to the point she didn't retain her softness. She instinctively brought her hand down to her belly, remembering the feeling of having their child in there. For all the attractive traits that Alice talked about her growing into, it was probably the least physically attractive trait that she wanted the most. The ability to carry a child. Grandpa had of course given the biological analysis of her growth, but it was actually Leah that flat out said it. Leah never held anything back from her. What she said changed everything. No matter what anyone else says, girl, you were built to be Jacob's mate. Those words resonated now as she looked down at her body. Whether her chest was overly big, her hips just a tad too wide, her legs too long, none of it mattered to her anymore. She was built to be Jacob's mate. Darn right she was. And even though Jacob hadn't seen what was underneath the clothing yet, she definitely wanted him to at least have some idea. She was all his, body and soul. When he was ready, he could take whatever he wanted as many times as he wanted it. She'd just hoped that it wouldn't take too much longer, because while she is shy by nature, something about Jacob and thinking about becoming one with him has made her feel like doing things that were well not very shy. She once again had to reprimand herself, knowing how her Jake would react to her thinking like that. Renesmee knew how upset Jake got anytime she referenced herself as his, like she and Enif. I resembled an object that could be owned. Jake never allowed that, but she couldn't help it. She was his, and his alone in every way possible. So here she stood, for the first time in forever, wearing a real dress, no leggings underneath. Her daily wardrobe up to this point pretty much consisted of sweatpants, yoga pants, capris, jeans, and Jake's shirts. She looked down at the result of wanting to dress up for Jake. Alice had given her a sundress, which was an odd term for her. She'd have to imagine sundresses weren't exactly popular in the vampire community, but Alice insisted. So she was wearing a yellow and white sundress that she was afraid might be a little too short for her liking, this time, no leggings underneath. Call her old-fashioned, but she did not feel comfortable about the length of her current outfit. There was just a little too much leg showing, with the bottom of the dress reaching just above the knee. Alice threw a fit that it wasn't shorter, but Renesmee would not give in on certain things. The dress going mid-thigh was one of them, especially without leggings. Renesmee instinctively tried to pull the dress down a little farther to reach past her knee, but her chest and hips just caused it to ride back up. Speaking of chest, that was another very strict rule for her. Too much cleavage was another area she wouldn't relent on. Yes, her entire body was for Jacob. But unless they were going to be alone, then she would never let an outfit reveal that much. While the sundress was somewhat tight around her chest, causing underneath her arms to reveal a little more skin than she liked. It was modest enough that she knew her arms could hide it. She smiled, thinking when she insisted on wearing a shirt underneath the sundress. One would have thought she'd just kick the puppy with the hurt in Alice's eyes, which was why she didn't. Keeping her own modest standards, but pushing the envelope the most she would for now, allowed her to at least feel presentable to her future husband. Future husband, minus the future part, sounded so warm, so inviting to her. She was never really sure about titles, assuming eternal mate summed everything up. But husband had a very special meaning. Just like the title of father did. Thinking of Jacob having both those titles seemed so perfect to her. Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of Jake's motorcycle. Motorcycle, oh shoot. Renesmee gave a panicked look down at her sundress. Riding on a motorcycle with Jake, in the sundress, how exactly was that supposed to work, she wondered. She concentrated on the distance Jake was from the house, trying to determine if there was enough time to change. He was approaching fast, so it was too late to do anything now, since the whole plan was for him to see her waiting for him in the special outfit. They would just have to figure something else out. She straightened the dress a little more, giving one final tug to hopefully lengthen the dress. She then fixed her hair just right so Jake could see his favorite part, but also not hiding the dress. Even with Jake this close, she still couldn't help thinking about how much he loved her hair. She had done her hair in the way Jacob loved, flowing freely over her shoulders, reaching almost the length of her dress. She had spent the most time doing her hair, because that was the one way, since the beginning, that Jacob had always shown her a little bit more attention. Renesmee closed her eyes, remembering how much she loved when Jacob braided her hair, but loving even more how no matter what they were doing, from training, hunting, watching a movie, playing games, his hands always found an excuse to touch her hair. She absolutely cherished the times he would play with her hair. It was almost like a second link that they shared. It was like a reflex of his that sometimes he didn't even realize he was doing it as he played with her hair. So she knew he would love it, especially today. She'd put all the extra effort into it today because she needed him to realize how important. Her thoughts were interrupted as she heard a loud crash right in front of her. Renesmee quickly opened her eyes. Oh my God, Jacob. She quickly ran to him as he laid sprawled in the dirt not 30 feet in front of her. She'd been so deep in thought she never saw him approach on his bike. Jacob, you okay? She reached him as he was already starting to stand, not even bothering to brush himself off from all the debris, never once taking his eyes off her. She quickly looked beyond him at his motorbike, which was embedded into a nearby tree. It must have thrown him this far. Oh Jacob. She knew that bike meant a lot to him, and it broke her heart that it was ruined. She knew his alpha healing was kicking in, especially with her this close. So the physical bruises weren't as worrisome as the loss of his bike. Once knowing he was okay, she finally had a chance to look into his eyes. What she saw in those eyes was something she had never seen before. They were definitely a darker shade than usual, but much more intense. It was like he was seeing something for the first time. His retinas were unusually small, as if he was staring at the brightest light. Jacob. She didn't want to read his thoughts yet. They had talked about that, and while normally it wouldn't matter, since the courtship, for some reason Jacob said no reading his thoughts. Are you okay, Jake? Renesmee reached up her hand to smooth back his hair, picking some pieces of grass and gravel from it, his eyes still intensely looking at her. Renesmee saw him methodically reach for her hand, placing it securely to his cheek. This was the most intense she had ever seen Jacob. It was beginning to worry her. Read my thoughts and feelings. She took a slight step back, only to be pulled right back where she was by his other hand. She closed her eyes to concentrate as she linked with him, reading his thoughts, feeling his emotions as Jasper taught her. Her eyes shot wide open, her breath caught in her throat. She could feel her heart beating at the speed of light. Thank you, Alice. I don't know what to say, Jake. She was blushing now, the heat exploding everywhere as the thoughts of what Jacob saw in her reached the recesses of every molecule in her body. She never in a million years would have thought she could have this effect on him with just her body. If she'd known this, she would have started wearing sundresses a long time ago. That thought quickly receded as Renesmee realized it wasn't the dress that had caused those feelings in Jake. After analyzing Jacob's thoughts a little closer, Renesmee realized Jacob had finally seen her, really seen her. Not as a protectee, not as just a friend, not even as just his girlfriend. She finally knew he saw her as his eternal mate. It was then Jake finally snapped out of it. He was speechless, and that in itself was a miracle. He didn't think it would happen like this. He had not really put up barriers, trusting in their bond to guide them. There were times when he had to slow things down, but this was the first time there was no doubt. This was his wife, his eternal mate. No more waiting. Jacob went down on one knee, forgetting moments before he had been in a major crash. Of course, the cause of that crash being the angel in front of him and his inability to pull his eyes away from her even as the tree was fast approaching. He'd worry about the bike later and the ribbing he was sure to get from his family. None of that mattered now. Renesmee shot her hands to her mouth, nearly screaming out as she saw Jacob go down to one knee. Oh my God, yes Jacob. Yes yes yes. Okay, no training. Tears could come as she started to hyperventilate. Jacob smiled. Nessie, I haven't asked you the question yet. Renesmee was practically jumping out of her skin. She couldn't help bouncing up and down on her feet. Jacob was going to do it. Jacob Black was finally going to do it. Okay, right, calm down. He hadn't actually done it yet. Wiping away the tears, blowing out a huge breath. Okay, I can be calm. Renesmee, be calm, for the love of God be calm. He's finally asking me to marry him. Oh right, he's got to actually ask first. Okay, I'm calm. Ness, you're projecting. Woo-woo. Okay, I got this. Okay, I'm calm. Wait, just a second. Renesmee took a quick walk in a circle, stopping and bending over as she placed both shaking hands on her knees, forgetting what this position must look like in her dress. She was trying very hard to regain some much-needed oxygen in her lungs. She raised an outstretched hand towards Jacob, asking him to give her a second. Jacob just smiled. He'd never seen Nessie like this. You know Nessie, I would really like to ask you something important right now. Okay, I can do this. Renesmee took 4 quick breaths as she finally stood up straight, bouncing from leg to leg, cracking her neck from side to side, similar to how she did when her and Jake were sparring. Let's do this. Another quick breath as she finally walked up to where Jake was still kneeling. He's going to ask, okay, just shut up and let him do it. Ready, go. Jake just smiled at her enthusiasm. Renesmee Carly Cullen, from the moment I saw you, I knew you were the one for me. You changed everything for me. You brought a light to my darkness and you've never let that light dim, making it brighter every minute of every day I've spent with you. So I would like to ask is, oh my gosh yes Jake, darn it, sorry. Renesmee slammed her hands over her mouth, not trusting herself anymore. Nessie, will you marry me? His answer came as the love of his life crashed into him, jumping into his arms as he now had to stand to not awkwardly fall back onto the ground again, her repeatedly saying yes, a verbal confirmation that she agreed to be his wife. Renesmee was so lost in the moment that it surprised her a bit when a thought hit her. Wait. Renesmee quickly gathered herself, ignoring the position she was in as she had her long legs wrapped around Jacob, holding him tightly as she clung to his neck. Obviously riding a motorcycle in a sundress with Jake wouldn't be a problem anymore. Jake, what about a ring? Renesmee pulled back a little, looking at Jake, assuming he just forgot something. The world needed to know she was his, and from her understanding, a ring was what showed that. Jacob still couldn't believe this was happening. Sure, they knew this would happen, but to actually making it real just was crazy to him. Which was one reason they really never talked about the details, and that included the ring. I know we actually never talked about this before Ness, but we don't wear rings for obvious reasons, and usually our mates don't either, well mostly. That made sense to her, picturing many rings shattering if a wolf forgot to take it off before phasing. Still though, for her she wanted something to show she was Jake's. But how will people know I'm yours? Jacob laughed a bit at her words. First of all Ness, I don't own you, you know that right? You are a very strong and capable woman that doesn't belong to anyone. Renesmee tilted her head. I belong to you Jake. She wasn't sure why he had a problem with this. You belong with me, not to me. Jacob had a feeling this might just be a lost cause, and if he really had a problem with this, might have been a good idea to have this talk a few years ago. Renesmee was pulling at his dark hair, running her fingers through it to feel the calm that it gave her. Jacob still didn't get it, but she wasn't about to argue with him. Not now at least. She urged him to continue. Jacob debated whether he should reach in for a kiss. He thought doing that now, in the position they were, her legs securely wrapped around him, might not allow him to explain to Nessie about the ring or possibly anything else. So he stopped himself from kissing her, although holding onto the exposed skin of her thighs was really starting to become a problem for him. He stopped as he saw a blush forming on Nessie's face. Darn it, he never told her to stop reading his mind. Jake. Renesmee started to forget the topic as she silently on purpose slid down a little farther around Jacob's waist. About that ring. Jacob, with a strength he didn't know existed, lovingly removed his fiancée's very long, very soft, and very sensuous legs from around his waist. Renesmee got down from Jacob, realizing that was very inappropriate of her to act like that. She honestly didn't know what came over her because she would never do something like that. It was just something about the situation that unleashed her inhibitions. I'm sorry Jake. She once again tried to straighten her dress, suddenly the feeling that the dress was even shorter now was hitting her. Jacob reached down to place a hand on her cheek. He smiled when she grabbed it, and almost melted into it. Nessie, don't ever be sorry for stuff like that. We have a lot of new things to experience physically and we'll need to learn those things together. We've held back for so long and now there is nothing stopping us. I just think we need to pace ourselves. Yako. B could see her timidness again and he hated that he just did that to her. He loved the way she just let go and let her true emotions show. It was so amazing to see her act like that, and the last thing he wanted was her to feel timid around him, like she did something wrong. Especially now when finally he could welcome every emotion, every temptation in. Ness, you do understand that we're on this journey together. I'm pretty sure you knew already, but my experience with the physical stuff is just about on par with yours. I have to be honest, I have no experience in how all this works from this point on. Renesmee shyly asked, looking at her fiancé, we figure it out together. Absolutely. This is nothing new to us Ness, well the communication part is not new. I don't want my wife to be shy or reserved around me. Because I need just as much help. He saw the gleam in her eye at the mention of wife. It was like a light bulb went off. Look honey, I know you read my thoughts, but I really just have to tell you out loud. Jacob stood back just a bit to breathe in all her beauty before he continued. You literally take my breath away Nessie. I mean you're always the most beautiful thing in the world to me. But seeing you like this, seeing you in this outfit, it was like someone took a mental photograph from my head of what the perfect look for you was. It's like well it's like you woke me up to see what you truly are to me. Jacob shook his head, a bit frustrated. I don't think I'm explaining this right. You're just perfect Nessie. Absolutely perfect. Whatever reservations she may have had were wiped out. Not that her reservations were that strong to begin with. After all, it's kind of hard to be reserved around Jacob, and his words were one of the million reasons why. I love you Jacob Black. Jacob smirked. I love you too Renesmee Black. He laughed inwardly as he saw the look come over her. She looked as if the heavens opened and the angels started singing. He still had to pinch himself as to how wonderful this woman could make him feel. Renesmee just lit up hearing her name. She didn't sparkle like the rest of her family, but she was sure she was glowing at least. She closed her eyes taking in a deep breath. Say it again Jake. Jacob brought her closer, Renesmee Black. He then quickly kissed her cheek. Renesmee sighed, pure contentment overcoming her. Perfect. The moment lasted a few more minutes as both stood there embracing one another, the world around them cut off completely. It wasn't until the ring issue popped into Renesmee's brain that she realized it still wasn't resolved. Her face still embedded firmly into Jake's neck, she asked, so how do I get my ring Jake? Jacob had never been more content and it was such an odd feeling. as almost every emotion in the book had seemed to be thrown their way. Talking about the ring would hopefully just bring about more of the good emotions since it really meant a lot to him. Well, it's handled different ways. But I was hoping we could do like my mom and dad did. They had their symbols tattooed on their fingers where a normal band would go. You mean like the thing on your arm, but around our finger? Yeah, it would be the symbol you gave me that I wear around my neck. But it's more permanent as obviously you can never take it off. A worried thought occurred to Renesmee, as she stepped back a bit to look at Jacob. But will it be able to happen with my skin and healing ability? Renesmee was worried because of all their communication together. This was one thing that surprisingly never came up. Yeah, I know it will work because it works for us wolves. The man that does the tattoos is, I guess some would consider, a medicine man, not your traditional tattoo artist. He's very revered in our tribe and has been uniting couples since forever. I already talked to him last month about tattooing our symbols and he said it would be his honor. Jacob never finished his thought as Nessie was now pulling him along. Nessie, where are we going? Getting the keys to the truck in the garage. Okay, and where are we going after that? I thought you'd at least want to tell your family about the whole engagement thing. Jacob was actually trying to keep up. His fiancée was very determined. Later. I want to get my tattoo now. Renesmee might have been young in Earth years. But she knew enough about marriage and engagements to know that most women wore rings. She was not most women. The thought of having something permanent, something that would last through eternity, appealed to her more than any earthly item could. She didn't want to wait to finally have Jacob's mark on her, the mark that would show everyone she had given all of herself to Jake. Jacob nervously laughed. Sweetheart, I don't even know if he's home. Renesmee stopped and turned towards Jacob, her sudden stop causing him to accidentally run into her. She didn't mind the closeness. We'll track him down then. And don't think I didn't catch the part about you asking over a month ago. We'll talk about that later. She was done talking now because the more they talked, meant more of a delay, and from this point on, there would be no more delays. Take that courtship. Jacob and Nessie's pack was just finishing up one of their intense training sessions. Leah and Nessie were with Seth cleaning up the lake while Rose and Jake were trying to re-stabilize some of the trees that were damaged during the training. Rose could tell something was on Jax's mind and she was starting to get irritated at his more than usual politeness towards her. He knew better than to treat her like this, especially during and after training. She fed off anger, and him being nice to her didn't help. Of course, her getting mad because he was being so nice might just have been his plan all along. Rose was just fixing the roots around one of the tall spruce, when she finally had it. Just spill it, Jax, what's on your mind? Jacob looked up, as he shoved one of the giant trees back to an upright position. What do you mean, Rosé? Rose pinched the bridge of her nose. I know the wedding is this weekend, but something else is bothering you. What is it? Jacob brushed off his hands as he tentatively walked up to where Rose was finishing up. Well, I was wondering if you would mind being the honor guardian at our wedding. Rose gave him a quizzical look. Even though Quileute tribal weddings were a little different, the concept of maid of honor and best man were still part of the ceremony. Those of course went to Seth and Leah. While she wanted to be part of the wedding, the last thing she wanted was some made-up token title just because they felt bad for her. Even so, she knew now was not the time to get into it with Jax. So she just shook her head and replied, Sure Jax, whatever you need. Jacob looked at her, wondering why she was acting like that. He was completely serious. Rose, I really mean this. You're who I want as the honor guardian. She'd play along, knowing that to Jax, even being a valet for the wedding would mean a lot to him. She would get over her own insecurities about not being more involved in the wedding. But no need to bring Jax down. I said fine Jax, I'm going to go clean up. Jacob just stared at her as she walked towards the rest of her pack near the water. Renesmee, sensing her aunt close by, ran up to her. Did you say yes, Aunt Rosie? Okay, they sure were hamming this up, Rose thought to herself as she saw the excitement in her niece's face. Sure, why not? Thank you so much, Rose. This means the world to Jake. Renesmee hugged her aunt, before running after her soon-to-be husband. Leah just nodded her head to Rose as she went back to the house to get some food. Rose was really starting to get frustrated that people were all in on this honor guardian joke. You have no clue, do you? Seth just looked at the blonde goddess, shaking his head. I think I have a pretty good idea. And while thanks for including me, I think this whole act from you guys is a little too much. Rosalie was washing herself off in the river, once again her frustration getting to her as she was so far gone that now she was washing off in the river just like her wolves. Mom, can you come here a sec? Seth called Renesmee, who was securely attached to Jacob's side. Renesmee looked to Seth and Rosalie and back up at Jake. You might want to be there for this, Jake. Renesmee led Jacob to the water near Rosalie. Seriously guys, I get it, okay. I do appreciate the thought. Rosalie held up her hands, now getting a little uncomfortable with the whole act. Seth looked at her more serious than he ever had before. I don't think you do get it. Renesmee lifted her free hand to Rosalie's cheek. May I? Rosalie just nodded yes. That is when the projection hit her. She saw the sacred traditions of the Quileute tribe. She saw Jacob talking to his father about the honor guardian. She saw Jacob telling the leaders about who he had chosen. She saw their approvals. And lastly, she saw just what the honor guardian represented to the Quileute tribe and how much it meant to Jacob. When the projection ended, all she could do was stare at Jacob. You chose me. She was shaking her head in disbelief. Jacob approached her, putting a loving hand on her shoulder. There was never any other choice. He then leaned down to kiss her on the side of the cheek. Hate you, Rose. Rose couldn't really process what was happening. According to what she saw, honor guardian was similar to the concept of a godparent, but so much more. Only the Alpha can choose a guardian, and it must be someone that he has complete faith will take care of his imprint and his family. It's only ever been bestowed upon the one closest to the Alpha, the one he'd have no doubt would always have his back and protect his entire family. Jacob had chosen her. Rose grabbed the side of Jacob's head, bringing him back down as she hugged him close. I love you, Jacob. Renesmee felt a tear coming as she witnessed probably one of the greatest miracles in her lifetime. She remembered talking to Kay about how Rose fought for her to be born. It never dawned on Jacob all that Rose did to make sure Renesmee was born safely. She remembered seeing for one of the very few times in her short life, Jacob ever getting really emotional. It was after that she knew things changed how Jacob saw her aunt. Their relationship had progressed to the point it wasn't even a thought for Jacob as he chose Rose to be his honor guardian. One of the greatest honors ever given their tribe. She hugged her aunt and husband close as they welcomed her in. Seth, not wanting to be left out, came and joined the pack hug. This is so awesome. Blank. Before you say a word, Jax, we're not getting emotional. Rosalie was leaning against the railing on the outdoor patio, Jacob standing right next to her, doing the same. You know how I feel and I know how you feel, so none of that emotional crap. Jacob just laughed. Wouldn't want it any other way. They stood in silence, Rosalie getting a tad anxious as Jax hadn't spontaneously combusted being away from Renesmee for 15 minutes now. Rose finally decided to break the silence. So we've been through quite a lot, huh? Jacob turned suspiciously towards her. Oh, just shut up. Maybe a little emotion wouldn't hurt. Rose responded as she punched the smirking Alpha. Jacob playfully bumped her with his shoulder. Yeah, gotta admit I never thought you'd be my choice. We didn't exactly start out on solid ground. You know I really didn't hate you. I know what you did for our family, even before Nessie was born. I don't know, we're jealous. Jacob interrupted, smirking at her. You're a dick, you know that. Rosalie elbowed him in the side. Love you too. Jacob looked back out into the darkened forest, a calmness overtaking him. I really didn't hate you either. I thought you were a bit stuck up, and that stuff always bothered me, but once I got to know you better, I still didn't like you very much. Gee, thanks. Rosalie just shook her head. Seriously though, when Ness told me what you did to make sure she was born, or I guess when I finally realized it, something inside me changed. I knew after the newborn incident. Our relationship changed, but when Ness told me about all you did, I just couldn't stop my feelings changing for you. Jacob took a deep breath. Rose, if I didn't have Nessie I don't know what I would have done. Rosalie could hear the emotion in his voice. She rolled her eyes as she wrapped her arms around his. Damn, he is warm, Rosalie thought as she saw his smile as tea. S was the closet they had ever got without saying goodbye or greetings. I'm glad she has you, Jax. I really am. Rose heard a slight growl coming from behind her. She just rolled her eyes. Oh, just chill out, niece. I'm just having a moment with the dog. My dog, Renesmee said as she came up on the other side, pulling Jacob into a deep kiss. They both smiled at the gagging sound coming from Rosalie. You know, dog is kind of offensive to a strong and revered wolf as myself. Jacob faked hurt. Renesmee overdramatically swooned. My hero. Jacob looked over at Rose. The girl's got good taste, don't ya think? Rosalie just rolled her eyes. She was about to respond when a large sigh was heard from behind them. They all turned to see Seth staring at them, a look of pure admiration in his eyes toward his alpha. Jake, you're so cool. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Seth then went to one knee, mockingly bowing before his superhero. Jacob closed his eyes, still surprised that Rose was still holding his arm. Last one to first beach is a rotten egg. A swish was heard as Leah must have heard down on the forest floor and was already off. Before Jacob could react, he was shoved forward by both Rose and Nessie, causing him to crash into Seth, both tumbling to the ground backwards. Jacob just looked at Seth and then back to the space where his fiancée and Rose once stood. I can't believe they just did that. Pay her back on the honeymoon. I heard that Seth, a not-so-happy Renesmee linked to the pack. Sorry Mom, Seth linked as he quickly phased and took off. Jacob just smiled as he was left alone, turning to see Emmett and Jasper in a heated game of Call of Duty. They gone. Come on bro, need you for death match. Emmett called out, glancing sideways at Jacob. Jacob jogged over. That was easier than I thought. Jacob grabbed a controller, logging into the game. Oh, she'd take mushrooms. Emmett felt it before he saw it, as now standing in the doorway behind them. With both hands on her hips was Jacob's future wife. Jacob closed his eyes as he reverently placed the controller back on the ground. Hey honey. Jacob squeaked out as he stood up, head bowed, and walked out the door, taking great care in not touching Nessie as he walked by. Trouble was the only word spoken as Jacob phased and tried to head the exact opposite way of First Beach. No such luck as the link happened. Jacob, you better be heading to First Beach. Yes dear. Jacob quickly changed direction, heading now to First Beach, hoping that his fiancée could take a joke. Not likely, he realized as he felt the familiar grasp as Renesmee somehow landed on his strong back, squeezing him a little tighter than normal as they barreled through the woods. Honey, don't you think you were riding me a little too hard? Jacob linked. Jake, if you wanted to play video games you just had to ask. I did not want to go to First Beach without you, but I would have stayed and watched you play video games if that's what you wanted. Jacob snickered. God, did he love this woman. Babe, I meant your knees are digging into my side, making it a little bit hard to breathe. Oh, Renesmee quickly loosened her grip. She then laughed at the double entendre. Her husband was going to drive her crazy and she wouldn't have it any other way. Renesmee was finally alone. After the hustle and bustle of getting ready, the makeup, the hair, the wardrobe, the constant words of encouragement, she was alone, sitting in Jacob's sister's old room, waiting for the moment she's wanted all her life. Renesmee was sitting in front of a full-length mirror, looking at herself dressed in the simple tribal wedding gown. It was an off-white but not exactly tan like most tribal gowns. Alice had incorporated a mix between classic traditio NS and the traditions of Renesmee's tribe. Renesmee had decided that she had wanted a more traditional Quileute wedding and dress, like the pictures of Mama Black and Grandma Black. She wore her hair parted in the middle and braided down each side of her head. The braids interlaced with turquoise beads and tied at the end with Jacob's promise bracelet colors. She wanted to stay as true to Jacob and Deher's heritage, but also not leave the Cullen bloodline out either. She wasn't sure if Jacob would like her hair like this, but she wanted to look as much like a traditional Quileute bride as she could. With her modesty, the tribe's traditions, and Alice's special touches, she believed she truly resembled the bride of the future Quileute chief. She felt more special than she ever had when looking at herself in the mirror. Of course, with Jacob, she always felt special, but alone, with just her thoughts, this was the first time she felt perfect. She took a deep breath, looking up to the ceiling, trying not to cry. She fanned herself with her right hand as the emotions of being Jacob's wife were overcoming her. Renesmee contemplated the journey to get here. It had only been a week since the proposal, so yes, this was quick. But in essence, Jacob and her had been engaged for almost 5 years. Where their physical training prepared them for battle, everything else they did prepared them for this. Renesmee thanked the great creator that Jacob and her established an open line of communication and trust from the very beginning. It wasn't easy by any means, especially in her early teen years before the Disney trip. She remembered many times how difficult it was not to act on all her emotions, her urges, her wants and desires. What she was so thankful for was how Jacob treated her during those times. He never, ever treated her like a china doll. He told her from early on that if she wanted to be his eternal mate, then she had to be tough, she had to be able to defend herself and her family. Being the wife of the future chief brought a huge responsibility, a sacred duty to the tribe, not a free pass. That is why she put everything into her training, tripling the efforts in her early teen years, because that is how they both coped with the urges. Jacob never made her feel as if her feelings, her urges were wrong or bad. He would always say first and foremost that she was absolutely the most beautiful creature in his world. He didn't treat her as a leper and run and hide at the simplest touch, freak out at a simple kiss. Jacob never stopped holding her hand, hugging her, kissing her. They actually never did change anything. Jacob just said, the change in their relationship was a learning experience for them both and shouldn't be shunned or looked at as a bad thing. But he also was very adamant that the physical stuff had to be treated like controlling the need for blood. She was not alone. Well, she was never alone in learning that control, as Jacob was right by her side. Renesmee knew back in the start of her teen years that her attraction to Jacob was much more extreme than his was to her. She remembered the talk with Leah shortly after the ridiculous courtship started. He said that while Jacob was her everything, she could not truly be his everything yet, and it would take time. She kinda always knew that, but Leah just articulated it a lot better. But what she loved about that time was Jacob never acted like it wasn't the most important thing in the world, and they both would try to overcome things together. The one time shortly after the magical Disney trip, they were heading to their spot when her lustful feelings were at an all-time high. She remembered hugging him, and kissing his neck, peppering him with soft kisses. Her senses were just going nuts and she couldn't control herself as she lost all control and bit him. At that moment, something in her clicked and she couldn't control herself. Where the end of the Disney trip was the opening to a more intimate relationship. What happened after was a whole other story. Even with the lust emanating from her body, and wanting him completely, instead of pushing her away, or freaking out, she remembered. He softly whispered to her how much he loved her. She remembered him picking her up in his arms, kissing the side of her head softly, and walking her to their spot near the edge of the cliff where he sat down with her across his lap. She was still feeding, running her hands all through his hair and along his muscular shoulders. As they sat down gently, Jacob began to tell her about the night that he thought everything was lost. How alone he was, how hurt he was. She could tell the effect she was having on him because it sounded like every word was a struggle for her mate to get out. But slowly, as Jacob spoke in his loving tone, the desire to devour him in every way began to subside. Jacob's soft yet deep and comforting voice encompassing her in a warmth as if it too was part of his body. They had talked about that moment of reflection before she was born on different occasions, but this time it was different. This time, it was told by Jacob as if it meant something more, something deeper. Renesmee remembered stopping her feeding as her body filled with power at drinking his blood, but then as it always did, having his blood now flowing through her veins connected them on a much deeper level. If that was even possible. That was also when she realized what Jacob was doing. He was showing her, as only he could, a whole other level to their bond. Where before she would listen and picture herself as the answer to his prayers, a player in a fantasy brought to life by his words. But in that moment, in his arms she understood now she was the answer. Not a fantasy character in her head, but her. Renesmee Carlisle Cullen was the answer to Jacob's prayers. Renesmee remembered projecting to him what she felt, what she wanted to do to him. But then she also projected to him what this moment meant to her. How he treated her, how he was there for her. He needed to know how. While she wasn't sorry for those urges, she understood a little better why they needed to be careful. They were in their endgame now. And they both knew it as they looked out over the darkened water. These were moments, little memories that added to their story, but these are just moments. Their goal as to get married and start a family, and to do that, they needed to honor the ground rules they had set for each other, together. Wow honey, I guess I was right about Jacob. Renesmee almost jumped hearing her dad now in her room. She didn't blush, obviously the only things to blush about would be coming after tonight. And she didn't really mind leaving her mind open, once again, when you are marrying the perfect man. And he treated you like a princess, there was nothing to really hide. Edward walked over to his beautiful daughter and placed a loving hand on her shoulder. Sorry for reading your mind. But you just looked so peaceful, so in love. Renesmee reached a hand back to place on her father. I am Dad. Jacob has been so good to me. Thank you for trusting us. Edward smiled at her. You know, as much as I would like to say it was hard to let go, it really wasn't. Having someone like Jacob be my only daughter's eternal mate, yeah, that was pretty easy. I love you Dad. Love you too sweetie. Renesmee bit her bottom lip, wanting to say this and hoping that she got it right. Dad, I know I kind of had this infatuation with Jacob from the very beginning. Ya think. I know. It couldn't have been easy to let me be with him, every second of every day. But I want you to know just how much that meant to us to me. You have no idea how much more I love you and Mom because you did trust us. You let us develop our bond and you never made us feel like we were doing something wrong. I will never forget what you guys did for us. I want you and Mom to know that you will always be a huge part of our family. Especially when or if we have kids, Jacob and I want you there every step of the way. Sweetie, I appreciate that, but I know Jacob would rather we kept out of it. Seriously Dad, what world have you been living in? Renesmee laughed a bit, her dad could be the funniest sometimes. At what point has Jacob not included you guys in anything? He respects you so much Dad and wants you in our lives. Don't even get me started on when we have kids. Jacob already has plans for an in-law suite next to the baby's rooms. And he told me, he needed you in the room with him during delivery because he didn't think he could do it without you there. Edward cringed a little thinking of the last time he and Jacob were in a delivery room or at least trying to deliver. But Renesmee was right. Maybe in an alternate universe he would have been at odds with Jacob, but not the one they lived in now. Your mom will definitely be glad to hear that. But enough about that, this is your day, your time. You trained your whole life for this. Edward gave her a smirk. Renesmee smiled and looked back at the mirror. Darn right, I trained my whole life for this. I'm marrying Jacob Black. She nodded at herself in the mirror as she stood up and wrapped her arm in her dad's. I'm ready. Blank. Jacob was standing at the head of the beautifully adorned, handmade archway located in his father's backyard, looking out at his family. The old treaty had been amended, and while the plans were to get rid of it entirely, for now they kept it to put at ease the elders in the tribe. But no longer were the Cullens banned from tribal lands, other vamps, yes, but the Cullens were family, and after today, Jacob knew that would become official in the eyes of the more traditionalists in their tribe. With all their family here, Jacob couldn't be happier, and looking around the yard where he grew up, he was still amazed what all his family was able to pull off. To make everything look so enchanted. He laughed to himself at channeling his inner Alice. But he couldn't believe how she could pull off simple, traditional, and elegant all at the same time. His sis pulled it off as she always did. He looked over to Alice and whispered, "Thank you Alice for everything." "Love you sis." Alice heard Jacob as only she could with her hearing and lifted her head up to look at him. She loved so much having a brother or now a nephew-in-law, who could easily show every emotion in the book just by his looks. It was one of her regrets of being a vampire as sure they could manipulate their bodies to display an emotion, but it never came naturally like a normal human. That was just one of the million reasons she loved spending time with Jacob, because he wore his emotions on his sleeves and she loved seeing those emotions. "Love you too Jake, you deserve this," Alice whispered. Jacob then looked over to Leah, who was standing across from him, waiting for Nessie. Seth was to his left, all three dressed in their ceremonial Quileute tribal outfits. Jacob, being of the chieftain bloodline where normally he could have gone with the full headgear of the chiefs, decided to stick with just a headband, matching his bride's turquoise and their family colors. He was wearing a tribal vest exposing quite a bit of skin, but Nessie insisted he go this route. vest was adorned with beading and intricate patterns sewn by each of the tribal families as tribute to their soon-to-be chief. Jacob actually felt at ease in his tribal gear. He would have went more traditional for Nessie's sake, but she insisted on honoring their tribe and their traditions. Just like Nessie insisted on having the wedding at his childhood home. There comes a point Jacob realized and he shouldn't be surprised at the depth of love Nessie had for him. He hadn't reached that yet because his soulmate continued to blow past any level he thought they reached. That is exactly what happened with her wanting to have the wedding here. Nessie could have picked anywhere, done anything she wanted, but her first and only place was here, in the backyard of where he grew up. There were obviously much more extravagant locations. But that just wasn't Nessie. With Nessie, everything had a purpose, a history, a deeper meaning, and the place she wanted to get married was no different. Nessie made it very simple when asked where she wanted to have the wedding. "I want to marry Jake at his home." When asked why, she plainly said, "Because that is where Mama's memory will be felt." Jacob felt the surge of love go through him as he remembered her words. Even when Nessie was young, it was always, "Our tribe, Papa Black, Mama." She had always made it clear where she felt most comfortable. And that was as an intricate part of everything Jacob. And he loved that about her, how she just was always a part of everything in his life. Jacob felt the emotion of remembering his mom came over him. He didn't remember much of his mom. But he knew without a doubt she would have loved Nessie. But while he loved his mom, it reminded him of the person that took over that role so easily. Jacob was trying to avoid looking at Esme because he really didn't want his emotions to get the better of him before his wife even walked down the aisle, but he couldn't help it. He looked over at his mom. "Damn it, Jacob, why did you do that?" He saw her look, and just knew how proud she was of him. When Jacob looked at his mom, his emotions just exploded inside of him. This woman had taken him in and treated him with love, with respect. With care when he thought no one ever would. She was just as much a real mother to him as if he was born from her. He loved her fiercely. "I love you, Mom, so much." Jacob didn't mean to say it so loud. Originally intending to whisper it, but it just came out much louder than he expected. He heard a loud "ah" from the crowd. He wasn't embarrassed at all as he saw the look on Esme's face. His heart swelled when he saw the look in her eyes. He knew she felt the same. Jacob just couldn't contain himself as he quickly ran up to the front row where Esme was sitting. He heard the questioning murmur go throughout the crowd, wondering what he was doing. He knew it wasn't protocol, but he had to do it. Jacob pulled Esme out of her chair and brought her up into a huge hug. The murmurs changed once again to "ah" as he hugged his mom close. "I love you, Mom. Thank you for filling that void in my heart." Esme hugged her son with a strength that would have probably killed a normal human, but who she held in her loving arms was no mere human. This was her son, her hero, who had done more for their family than was ever required of him. She had lost her first human son long ago, and while having their adopted family filled part of that hole in her heart, it never filled it completely. Not until the son she held in her arms came into their family. "I love you too, son. I'm so proud of you, honey." Esme wished she could stay like this forever, but she knew what this day was for. Esme regrettably broke the hug as she moved back a little, grabbing her son's face in her hands. "Now go be who you were always meant to be." Jacob smiled at his mom's words as he kissed her and headed back to stand in line. As soon as he got back in line, Seth bumped his shoulder and said, "Dude, you're so cool. I want to be just like you when I grow up." Jacob just shook his head as always. Seth got the crowd laughing, at least those that had supernatural hearing. Jacob looked over to his dad just to make sure everything was cool. His dad never once objected to his relationship with Esme or the Cullens in general. Any worry he might have had was instantly squashed as Billy nodded his head and smiled. Jacob was surprised he kept his emotions, at least partially, in check. Of course, it had a lot to do with the fact that he had never been more sure of anything in his life. He wasn't nervous, not at all actually. This was right, this was written in the stars. He waited his whole life for this, all he needed was the girl, and boy did he find her. He paused as he heard the trib. Drums began to beat, indicating it was time for the eternal walk. Jacob once again felt his emotions getting the better of him as he saw the rest of his pack coming towards him. Rosalie was a symbol of elegance, grace, yet extreme power and determination. The way she walked, the look in her eye, told you of the tenacity of a guardian. Jake looked at what the rest of the packs called the blonde goddess, and smiled, thinking of their own journey. After so much animosity and fighting in the beginning, Rosalie and Jacob had become something much more. Jacob really didn't even know how to define their relationship now. Best friends, brother, sister, beta. He really didn't know other than whatever it was. Being the honor guardian pretty much said it all. Rosalie was the one that Jacob could truly count on to protect his family if something happened to him. That's why it was a no-brainer to have her as the guardian. And after realizing what it meant, Rosalie had taken the responsibility on full tilt. Jacob loved his pack as crazy as they were, just a bunch of misfits. Jacob smirked to himself, a bunch of misfits that could take on anyone, anyplace. They truly were the A-team, and he was never more proud of the example they had all set. Jacob had been so deep in thought that he didn't realize Nessie was now within view. He and Nessie had of course talked about things for the wedding. But he hadn't a clue what direction she would go in. What he saw now literally took his breath away. Oh damn, hold it together Jacob, he tried to convince himself. If Jacob hadn't memorized every curve, every inch of his gorgeous soulmate, he might have thought this was someone else. Where Nessie was always just naturally beautiful no matter what she wore, lately, she had been really coming out of her shell. Remembering his recent accident and why that accident occurred was never more evident. He knew Nessie wasn't necessarily shy around him, but she was never very confident in just how beautiful she was, well not until lately. She was never one to flaunt what she had, or channel her inner Allison Rose, but with her body the way it was now, it really didn't matter what she wore, she was always drop-dead gorgeous. Instead of going with what he assumed she'd want, the long flowing white wedding dress, she had wanted to honor their traditions. And just like Nessie always did, she pulled it off and more. Jacob couldn't help the feeling coming over him as he looked at Nessie in her tribal wedding dress. He thought he might have been having the beginnings of a heart attack as he felt something was grabbing a hold of his heart and squeezing. He tried to gain some air as he felt his lungs contracting. He wondered what the heck was happening to him. He realized what it was as he saw a small smile on Nessie's face. Damn, how did he ever deserve this? He bent over trying to gain some control as he placed his hands on his knees taking some quick breaths. He felt Seth's calming hand on his back, but his emotions were just overtaking him at seeing his soon-to-be wife. This was everything he ever wanted, this was his dream girl, this was his everything, and she was right in front of him, giving herself to him. Even though he was looking at the ground in his bent-over state, all he could see was his Nessie. She was so beautiful, and seeing her as a true member of his tribe just hit him hard. He didn't know if it was the fact that she looked very similar to how his mom was dressed at her wedding that he had seen in photos. He wasn't sure why everything was hitting him so hard, but this couldn't be real. There was no way this kind of thing could happen to him. Jacob remembered all they had gone through to get to this point, but he still couldn't accept that something so special, so earth-shattering great could happen to him. Nessie couldn't be real, this all had to be some kind of dream. He knew he was going to wake up back on the cliff, reflecting again how miserable his life was. God, please don't let this be a dream, please dear God, let this be real. His heart stopped as he felt a rush of wind and two very familiar hands reach for his face, pulling him up to look at her. Nessie. Jacob couldn't hold back the tears as his everything was in front of him, pressing her head to his forehead. Oh Jake, this is real. I'm here Jake, I'm yours honey. Jacob let out a long breath. He felt like he was holding in forever. Tell me you're real, tell me this is realness. Screw traditions, Nessie thought as she kissed her husband, ignoring the confused looks around her. This is real Jake. But honey, I really want to become your wife so I can show you just how real this is. They both heard a slight cough coming from Rosalie. Sorry guys, Renesmee linked to her pack. It's okay mom and dad. Seth linked, a huge smile on his face. Jacob felt the air coming back to him as only Seth could make him laugh in a serious situation. You two got this, you were born to be here on this day. Everything you guys have done has led to this. Leah linked, smiling at her alphas. We've got this Jacob. Now marry me, I've waited a long time for this. And Jacob looked into Nessie's eyes, see. Something in them that he had to admit was very hot. I know the how now. The rest of the pack was not quite sure what that meant, but whatever it was, it woke Jacob the heck up. Jacob just tilted his head, giving her a watch it look. They still had a reception to go to. Renesmee kissed him again. I love you, sweetheart. She then ran back to her father that couldn't wipe the huge grin from his face. Edward had been accused of a lot of things. When it came to Jacob, he had gotten a lot of things wrong. One thing he knew for a fact he didn't get wrong was entrusting his daughter into Jacob's care. The ceremony went back on track and everyone held it together pretty good, but it was now time for the vows. It was Renesmee's turn as she held onto both Jacob's hands and confidently looked into his eyes. Jacob, my Jake. She smiled as she heard the crowd. I've loved you from before I was ever born. They say I was a miracle, but that's not true. You were my miracle. You never ever let me know what it was like to be alone, scared, unloved, unwanted, unneeded. You're everything I've ever wanted. You are more than I could ever deserve. I love you with all my heart, and promise to show you very day for the rest of eternity just how much I love you. Renesmee paused as she heard a yeah from Seth. She laughed as she saw Rosalie give him a dirty look. You are my prince, you are the one. Hat has always been my prince, and I thank you for giving me our happily ever after. I love you, Jacob Black, always have. Jacob squeezed his wife's hands, trying to gather the strength to continue. Yeah. Cobb let out a quick breath as he looked deep into Nessie's eyes. Ness, I thought about what to say. I thought about how to put into words just how special you are to me. I thought about how do you quantify the love I have for you. Are there even words that can accurately explain my love for you? I knew there were no words that could come close to telling you how much I love you. So I promised to tell you every day of your life just how much I love you, how much I need you, how much you mean to me. Jacob was caught off guard as Nessie reached up to kiss him. The crowd laughed seeing the quick exchange as Billy playfully reprimanded Renesmee for jumping the gun. Renesmee wasn't sorry at all. Some things needed to be done and kissing her husband needed to be done right then. Jacob smiled as he looked at his beautiful wife. You know, you once asked me how I can so eloquently tell our love story, how I can make it seem so magical. Jacob squeezed her hand as he looked deep into her eyes, mocking sure she knew the extent of what he was about to say. Nessie, it's easy to tell a love story, especially when you're living one. Jacob could see the tears forming in her eyes as a loud gasp was heard throughout the crowd. It didn't matter what anyone else did, he saw how his words just affected the love of his life. He smiled as he felt Nessie starting to bounce a little on her feet. His words had definitely got to her. Jacob then lifted her left arm where the promise bracelet was. He was going to be jumping the gun on the Christmas promises, but since these were the last ones, he figured their wedding day was just as good to complete the promises. Nessie, I promise to spend each day working to become the truest version of myself, for you, for us, and for our family. I promise to always be your Jake. Renesmee couldn't keep her emotions in check as the love of her life just said the absolute most beautiful words she had ever heard. Jacob truly was her prince, her love story. She never had a doubt who she would marry. And Jacob's words just proved to solidify she had made the right choice. She looked quickly to her promise bracelet, realizing this was the last promise. Didn't matter though as she looked at the tattoo on her ring finger and realized that was the beginning of new promises, promises that would last for eternity. Renesmee pulled Jacob down so their foreheads could touch, still looking in his eyes. Promise. Jacob smiled his megawatt smile that let her know everything was perfect. And his last words before the final words to legally bind them said it all. I promise. Carlisle hated this kind of news more than any other kind. Of all the joys of childbirth, delivering those gifts to their parents, there was always the rare case that he would have to bring bad news. Either a baby had died, or the parents could not have kids. He never thought he'd have to deliver any kind of news like this to his own family, but here he was. The news wasn't horrible, and there was still hope. Especially with Renesmee's ever-changing body, but he knew physically she was a full-fledged woman in the biological sense, her body finally catching up to her mental maturity, and that's what scared him. Was this the end of her physical changes? He had to believe no. Carlisle had Renesmee and Jacob wait for him in one of the back rooms, the rest of the family had gone And he hoped this would give them some privacy, make them feel more at ease. He walked into the room and there was Jacob and Renesmee, sitting almost as one on the couch, Jacob nervously rubbing Renesmee's back as they eagerly looked up at him for good news. "Is she okay, Carlisle?" Jacob thoughtfully inquired, wanting to make sure after their recent, week-long honeymoon that everything checked out okay. It never ceased to amaze Carlisle the level of love Jacob had for Renesmee. Jacob's first concern was her safety, even when that was not really why they were meeting. He was about to explain when he saw Renesmee lower her head, bringing her hand up to cover her eyes. She knew. Jacob sensed her pain as he looked to Nessie, then back at Carlisle. He closed his eyes briefly, took one long breath, then waited patiently for Carlisle to speak, all the while holding tightly to Renesmee. "First you two, nothing is ever set in stone. This family has been through too much not to know that miracles happen, things change. Events transpire that no one can explain. So we need a miracle." Renesmee barely spoke above a whisper. "That's not what I said, honey. Let me explain what's going on." Carlisle pulled up a chair, so he could sit in front of the two, placing a loving hand on Renesmee's knee. Renesmee's body is in excellent working order. He paused as he heard a relieved sigh from Jacob. "You still might have some growing or adjusting, but according to your charts. Kids, Grandpa, can we have kids?" Renesmee finally looked up, using the hand she had covering her eyes to now reach for Jacob's. "Not at this time, honey." "Hey, that's fine. She's okay though, right, Doc?" Jacob was trying to sound optimistic. "Just stop, Jake." Renesmee looked up at Jake, a sorrowfulness in her eyes. Jacob shook his head. "No, I won't stop, Nessie. I don't care about any of the other stuff. As long as I know you're fine, that's all that matters to me." Renesmee pulled her hand back and tried to move away. But Jacob's strong arm was not letting her get away. "Just let me go, Jacob, I've failed you." Jacob stopped everything he was doing, a look of shock coming over his face. "Hey, just wait a second, you two. I said you physically aren't ready to have kids now, but that doesn't mean it can't change." Jacob looked at him quizzically. "Could you have possibly led with that, Doc?" Jacob then looked to Renesmee, warning her not to go down the rabbit hole. Ignoring the look from her husband, Renesmee asked, "What do you mean, Grandpa?" "From the time of your previous exam 2 weeks ago, right before your wedding. Your cervix and uterus has definitely adjusted even more, improving from where you were before. From all intents and purposes, I don't see these improvements stopping." Carlisle could see a slight glimmer of hope in his granddaughter's eyes. "Here's the thing, all the pieces are in place for Renesmee's body to handle multiple pregnancies, all except that one vital last improvement. The one that will, in other words, unblocks your ability to have children. That doesn't mean it's never going to be ready, I just don't know why it's not happening now." Jacob reached over and kissed the top of Nessie's head. "See, babe, there's still a chance. We have plenty of time to let things play out." "No, we don't, Jake, and you know it," she projected, not wanting to be rude to her grandpa, but this was a private conversation. "Look, I'll give you two a minute and I'll continue to do some research. I've ran a full genetic workup that I should have back shortly, and I also want to do checkups at least twice a month to make sure if anything changed." With that, Carlisle kissed Renesmee and shook Jacob's hand, walking out of the room. Once the room was to themselves, Jacob turned to Nessie. "Nay, SSIE, you don't necessarily know the timeline of your vision." Renesmee still wouldn't look at Jacob. "Jake, you know the tribes needs us, look at all those young boys phasing. Ness, they have us. With our leadership and training them, our packs are stronger than they have ever been, our tribes are thriving right now. So this has nothing to do with whether we have kids or not." Renesmee stood to her feet, a feeling of letting her mate down just too uncontrollable to deny. "My responsibility is to make sure our pack gets stronger. I'm supposed to bring the next generation of alphas to the Quileute tribe. I'm no good to you unless I can provide you children." Jacob stood up in front of her, unbelievably able to control his anger. "I'm going to let that go because I know you're upset and not thinking clearly. I won't even acknowledge the stupidity in that line of thinking, although I guess I just did because of how ridiculous that was." Renesmee looked into his eyes now, lifting her hand up to him, showing him just how clearly she was thinking. Jacob forcefully removed her hand from his cheek. "Damn it, I feel like this is some crazy cycle we're stuck in. I mean, do you see the pattern here? I know you haven't had time to learn the ropes, but I think it's time you grow the hell up. Please don't speak to me like that, I don't deserve it. Renesmee instinctively grabbed his hand, holding it to her heart. This heart beats with your blood too, you know. I'm not some little girl, and you're the only one that knows that without a doubt, aren't you? Jacob looked down at his feet, a sudden rush of blood bursting into his cheeks, thinking about their honeymoon. But babe, we gone over this so many times, just let me finish, okay? Jacob took her hands in his, looking now in her beautiful brown eyes. I only want you. I've only ever wanted you. Why is that not enough? Renesmee reached up and kissed him. I know that, Jacob, and why can't you understand? All I've ever wanted is to give you a family. She pressed her cheek against his, needing him to lift her up to him. You knew this from the beginning, Jake, and that will never change. So what then, Ness? What happens if we can have kids? Because I really want to know. Jacob was suddenly losing that previous ability to remain calm. Well, then you can find someone that can give you that family. Jacob unceremoniously pushed her away from him. You know what? You need to really think about what you just said. I know you think your cause is noble and that you're willing to do whatever it takes, but I want you to really think about the words that just came out of your mouth. You deserve a family, Jake. Renesmee looked him right in Jacob's intense eyes. I deserve you, damn it. Jacob was trying to calm down. He saw his last words hit home with Renesmee, but he hated that she thought all he cared about was having kids. It wasn't like he was some stallion that needed to spread his seed. You know, Renesmee, I'm really sick and tired of this. When you act like this, you make me feel like I've forced you to think this way. That kills me. First, that's not fair, Jacob. You don't force me to do anything. Well, okay, maybe if you weren't my soulmate, then I wouldn't always feel the need to sacrifice everything for you. Maybe if you didn't love me so much, care about me so much, protect me so much, well, maybe then I wouldn't feel the need to return those things to you. Renesmee grabbed his head, bringing his giant frame closer to her so he would look at her as she linked. So unless you're going to stop being all those things to me, oh screw that. I don't even care if you treated me like a dog, you know, kind of like you're doing now. I'm completely and utterly yours. I would die 1,000 deaths for you, Jacob. And I would never ask for anything in return. I don't have a choice anymore, and I never did. I'm yours and yours only. And I will make sure you have a family. Well, then I guess there is no reason for us to have sex anymore. Ouch, damn it. Jacob rubbed his jaw where Nessie punched him hard. Take that back, Jacob, or I will punch you again. I'm not backing down from this. I don't care, take back what you just said. No, another punch. I can do this all day, Nessie. She was done projecting as he was making her even more angry now. You know what, Jacob, I can honestly say, since the moment I was born, this is the first time you've ever broken my heart. She hated crying, she thought it showed weakness, and being Jacob's mate, weakness was not something to show. But she couldn't help it. This hurt her more than anything she'd ever felt before. This woman just didn't get it. Look, Nessie. Don't call me that. Renesmee interrupted him. That one hurt more than the punches. Jacob started to realize she was more determined than ever now. Renesmee, I love you. No, you don't. Jacob closed his eyes. She couldn't possibly think that. Yes, I could, Jacob, because that is exactly how you're acting. So not having sex with you means I don't love you. Is that what you're saying? Because I'm pretty sure that is the only thing I said that would remotely make you think anything else. You, on the other hand, are acting ridiculous. She spun on him now, her anger building to her boiling point. Why is any of this such a surprise to you, Jacob? I've made it very clear to you that starting our family was the most important thing to me. Jacob held her in place now, his giant hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. I realize that Renesmee, but you are the most important thing. To me, and I won't even begin to contemplate starting a family with anyone else. We will wait for some other way. Let me go, you're hurting me. Okay, that was a lie, but Jake being this forceful her was making her feel things that she did not want to feel when she was trying to stay mad at him. Suck it up, Renesmee, stop being such a little girl about it. Renesmee gave him an evil look. I know what you're trying to do. And that is not going to work. She instantly projected to him how this was making her feel, How it was actually turning her on him, going all alpha on her. Stop that, damn it. Jacob tried to shake his head. The last thing he needed was the love of his life getting inside his head, showing him those kind of images. Jacob knew he had to put some distance between them. Else something would be said that was even more hurtful. Now was not the time to continue this. Jacob looked at Renesmee, breaking any physical or mental connection they had. I love you, Renesmee, I really do. But I want you to know that it breaks my heart to hear you talk like that. I'm leaving for a bit just to give us some space. Jacob paused as Renesmee reached for him. Please don't touch me right now. I need to know you are not influencing me in any way. Jacob cringed at the sudden hurt in her eyes. I'm sorry, honey. That was not fair, but I have to think clearly how to proceed because I will not allow the love I have for you to be dirtied by some convoluted notion of yours. I will be back tomorrow. Please stay here tonight so I know you're safe. Renesmee started freaking out at the thought of Jacob leaving her. It was her worst nightmare coming true. I promise I'll try to work this out. Please don't leave me, Jake. Jacob took a deep breath. He could feel their bond overwhelming him, but he would not let it control him. His wife needed to understand that there was no other option for him. She was his endgame. Nessie, I love you and I promise to be back. You know I would never leave you. But I have to get some space because I don't like the way you're acting and I will not allow myself to say something I'll regret. The force pulling at him to stay was quickly taking hold of him. He fought it though as he quickly turned and ran out the door and away from the house, never looking back as he phased. The hurt, the pain, it's what was hitting Jacob now, and if he had to be honest, this was much worse than the newborn venom. This kind of hurt went beyond physical pain, and it was the kind of pain that didn't make sense. He could understand hurt and pain if Nessie had left him for someone else, cheated on him, or became some evil vampire bent on destroying the world. But hurt and pain because she loved him too much. How the hell did that make any sense? Yet here he was, pounding through the woods in his wolf form, fighting with everything he had to distance himself from the one woman that loved him too much. The forest was a blur to him as he ran wildly through it. Her words replaying in his mind, then you can find someone that will. How could she even say that? All they've been through, all they've talked about, everything they trained for, and she thought so little of him that he would even remotely entertain such stupidity. Sure, he understood her desire to have a family, she made it very clear since the starvation that was her goal, but at what cost was the problem now? Yes, he wanted kids, their kids. If that couldn't happen, then so be it. He was just as content to spend the rest of eternity with just her. That's all he's ever wanted. Jacob started to slow down. The distance from Nessie was getting too great and he could feel the pull. He knew she must be hurting because every part of him was yearning to go back and be with her, comfort her. But she had to understand the part of her thinking where Jacob would find someone else was never an option. He wanted her to feel just how wrong it was to think that way. Jacob finally made it to a small inlet near the water. A place which he actually didn't recognize. He didn't even remember smelling the water. He quickly looked around, wondering if this was a section of First Beach or somewhere else. He sensed no one was around and so he phased back to human form, not wanting to take a chance any of his pack, including Nessie, could track him. His only regret, he had no clothes with him. But that was okay. This part of the beach looked like it was deserted anyway. He really didn't want to sit in the sand naked, so he decided to go for a swim, hoping the water might cool down some of this hurt and pain. As he waded out into the colder than usual water, he thought of how one person could bring out every single emotion in the book for him. It wasn't just what emotions she brought out in him. It was the intensity of those emotions that she demanded. The thing that frustrated him the most was after such an amazing honeymoon, not even a week later they were at this point. He remembered the wedding night. And Nessie's stubbornness, even then, just not letting go of the notion that the marriage wasn't official until they consummated it by making love. Jacob remembered how so many of those stupid shows he watched were way off in how they made it look. He could still feel the pain from her knees jabbing into his rib cage during the first, second, and third tries. He was so conflicted how something they both wanted so bad, and was supposed to be so natural, could be so frustrating. He didn't freak out or anything with her being in pain, that stuff was already talked about. He almost had to smile at her threats to him if he dared tried to stop during their first time. She told him if she didn't stop him, then he had to continue no matter what. Well, she stopped him all right. By the fourth try, they both decided to take a break, getting something to eat and planning how to proceed for the next time. Jacob at that point honestly was willing to just hold her and spend the night together as husband and wife, but Nessie was having nothing to do with it. She told him, they were going to do it whether it took them all week to complete. He did have to admire her tenacity because even with her own pain, she was not giving up. Consummating the marriage and her insistence her body was made for him was the driving factor to continue. Of course they finally were able to complete their first time, and he had to admit, thank God there was the next day, because he remembered thinking if this was how it was going to always be, it was going to be a long forever of cold showers. By the third day, their bodies both adjusted and it was something magical. He'd never seen Nessie act the way she did during sex. She was a whole new level of greatness when things finally clicked. He remembered how sore he was after that third night when Nessie's body was finally accustomed to him. It took him almost a whole day to recover from what she did to him. Which is why old not understand why she was acting like she was now. Nessie had to know how special that week, well half the week was, and to act like it never happened frustrated him. Sure, he knew she hadn't been feeling well after. But he was worried that had something to do with the amount of times and the way they consummated their marriage over and over during their honeymoon. That was his main concern going into the checkup. But once again, all Nessie cared about was getting pregnant, no concern at all for her own health. This was so much like the starvation thing. Nessie wanted so bad for him not to leave her. But it never occurred to her what her dying would do to him. She was so caught up in her cause, it was like she completely forgot that the reason for her cause, Jacob, she was willing to ruin him. Jacob wished so badly that Nessie could see the big picture. Jacob was now neck deep in the water, relishing in its more than usual coldness. He felt something near his leg but figured it was just a fish, although now he really worried about skinny dipping in the middle of the ocean with fish this close. He looked around him, feeling an uneasiness come over him, but his stubbornness was too strong to give in yet. He had to just calm down and think things through on how to proceed. Jacob was quickly losing his resolve thinking about Nessie, the love of his life. Two things he noticed: they moved their relationship to a more intimate one. Nessie was a whole lot more confident in everything. It was almost like this whole time, her growing up, she was just waiting for the official moment when they were married. Once that happened, all the shyness, timidness, completely disappeared. Jacob laughed to himself thinking of the next thing. Nessie came to the stark realization that now she could completely and utterly give all of herself to Jacob. She called it that now she could be Jacob's everything and she did not hold back. Nessie knew that her body was made for him in every way possible, and she was using this knowledge, over and over, to make sure Jacob knew too. Every inch of her was the perfect piece to a puzzle of Jacob's perfect mate. From her hair, her eyes, her neck, her chest, her stomach, legs, everything was as if sculpted perfectly from Jacob's mind of what he was most attracted to. Someone like Nessie was something he could only fantasize about, dream about. Never in a million years would he believe that those fantasies, those dreams would ever come true. Well, they did, and she was his, in every way. So why couldn't they just get past all this having? What the hell was that? Jacob grabbed his leg, feeling a sharp pain shoot through his calf. Another sharp pain shot through his other calf. Jacob quickly looked around the darkened water, wondering what the hell was attacking him. He'd stepped on a stingray before, but this was something much worse. He decided to dive under as the pain was intensifying and his mind started to become hazy. No way could a sting have this kind of effect on him. He dove down into the darkened water, quickly scanning the area around him. His mind went blank as he saw numerous pale cold hands grab him from underneath the water. Volturi was his only thought as he hoped the link with Nessie worked. "Come on Nessie, talk to me honey, what's wrong?" Jacob and his wife were sitting on First Beach, Jacob's arms wrapping around his pulled up knees while Nessie was snuggled into his side, her arms wrapped tightly around his. "I want you home. You need to come home." Jacob looked over the darkened water, staring at the as usual fog that blanketed almost where the eye could see. They were back in their dream link, which meant that he was in a lot of trouble in the real world. That was okay though, as long Long as he had Nessie here with him he would be okay. Jacob leaned to his right a little, giving her a kiss on the top of her head. He lingered there for a moment, taking in her scent, relishing in the softness of her beautiful long hair. He wanted to stay like this forever. Gathering his strength he released the kiss and looked back over the horizon. I guess since we're back here I was taken by the Volturi. Yes, they took you from me. Jacob sighed, contemplating what to do. You know we'll never be safe as long as the current Volturi Council rules. I know. Jacob could feel things starting to fade, which meant he was about to wake up in a world of pain. He wanted to make this quick before he was yanked back. You know I love you, Nessie. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Jacob felt the shaking side to side of her head. That was a no. Nessie, what are you going to do? Jacob looked over to where she now was, looking him squarely in the eyes, her eyes glowing a bright blue. Whatever it takes. Blank. Son of a man, this hurts. Jacob felt pain before, but this was excruciating as he was pulled back to the living to a realization that things were really bad. His ribs were killing him, his shoulders were on fire, and his wrists were rubbed raw. He tried to move his head but his neck muscles screamed in pain, not allowing him to. Didn't matter though. He didn't need to look up to know he was tied up, hanging from a rafter, beaten and bruised and naked. Jacob squeezed his eyes shut against the pain as he wondered just how long he'd been hanging by his arms on the rafters. His feet barely touched the ground, but that didn't really matter as even those hurt. I see you're awake, my little pet. The last word said with a sense of arrogance, as the P was popped. Arrow, this was not good, Jacob thought as now he understood where he was. Ah yes, I see you remember me. I've been waiting for a very long time to capture my prized trophy. My little alpha. The last word drawn out in almost a sensual tone. Jacob really wished he was not tied up right now, wanting to punch the guy just once in his pasty white nose. Arrow breathed in the scent, running his fingers across the hardened chest of his prisoner. I see now why all the females are so infatuated with you. You are quite impressive. Jacob wanted to vomit, seeing Arrow's eyes linger a little too long below his waist. It took all I had to keep the females from wanting to be with you. You really are a specimen to behold. Arrow closed his eyes and sniffed in the enticing scent of his ultimate prize. Your scent has definitely changed. No longer the wet dog smell, but something much more intoxicating, more primal. Arrow grabbed Jacob's face so his trophy would look at him. A scent that has warmed even the coldest among us. Jacob instantly shot his knee upward, cracking Arrow straight in the jaw. He then shot his legs forward the best he could and smashed them into Arrow's exposed chest, sending the vampire crashing into the back wall. Jacob screamed out as the pain hit him. The only thought he had as the blackness took him was of Nessie. Cullen's main house. Renesmee was silent. She remained silent as others were trying to figure out what to do. She had got the link from Jacob, but by the time everyone got to the location near First Beach, all signs of her husband were gone, all except his necklace, the one she made for him that second Christmas, which they found washed up on the shore. It was what she held securely in her hands now. Alice was able to piece together some things, and after Renesmee's dream link, which she still didn't quite understand, they were able to determine that the Volturi took Jacob. In all the preparation, all the training, in all the planning, it was always to protect her, never thinking that it could be Jacob that the Volturi wanted. Now they had him and the world around her was gone. It was a bunch of far-off voices and flashes of color where she knew people must be, but none of it was part of her existence. No, her existence changed the minute Jacob was taken from her. Renesmee sat there quietly, catching bits and pieces of the conversation. Carlyle wanted to talk to the Volturi, Emmett wanted to fight them all. Alice and Jasper were in the far corner, Jasper in the worst pain of his life, feeling the emotions of everyone in the room. Esme was in the kitchen, making Jacob's favorite meal, still in shock and not accepting that her son was taken from her. Seth and Leah were howling out near the lake, the pain still in their voices as they screamed out to the darkened sky. Edward had his head in his hands, trying to keep the thoughts organized in his mind. Bella is filled with so much rage that she kept shouting that they had to do something. Rosalie was the only one quietly sitting next to her, holding her hand. Renesmee could sense the pain that Rosalie was going through. It almost mirrored her own. I will feed on human blood. I need to be at my strongest. Bella shocked everyone with that statement. Edward just looked at her like she was out of her mind. Don't look at me like that. You've all been there once. I'll do whatever it takes and worry about the consequences after we get Jacob back. Bella was already planning to head to that biker bar in town. She was sure to find some lowlifes to feed on. Carlisle quickly interrupted. It doesn't necessarily work that way, Bella. Our strength doesn't come from what type of blood we consume. That is just a myth. You're wrong, Carlisle. I've seen the strength that comes to Renesmee when she was consuming Jacob's blood. That's not a coincidence. A thought then hit her. What about if we consume Seth or Leah's blood? They already said they would do whatever it takes. That wolf blood could make us all stronger. Bella was about to head out the door to call in Leah and Seth. Stop. Renesmee had it. No one is feeding on my pack. She stood up, giving her mom a dirty look. Alice suddenly interrupted her. Oh my God. Alice reacted, coming back from her vision. Edward was silent for a moment. A look of horror came over his face after finishing reading Alice's mind. Renesmee caught the look between her father and Alice. Her heart sank with the next word out of Alice's mouth. Chelsea. Rose shot up from the table. A panic overtaking her. Renesmee looked to her father, her stomach suddenly feeling like it was twisting into knots. Tell me. What is it? Bella with rage in her eyes looked at her husband. Tell us now, damn it. Alice saw what they planned to do with Jacob. Edward looked at his wife, then at Renesmee. Rosalie was already pacing back and forth, just the name causing her to enrage. They want Jacob to sire a new race of hybrids. Chelsea will take him as a mate. Then Edward had to gather himself at the thought of what they planned. They will force him to mate with Nahul's hybrid sister Serena, who is a more than willing participant in the Volturi's plan. They will use him to not only sire a new generation of vampire slaves, but to also control the wolves. Chelsea, Felix, and Jane will be used in the conversion of Jacob, among others. Renesmee just shook her head, knowing that her husband would never do that. Unfortunately, she didn't have as much confidence as she should after their last argument. Rosalie, seeing Renesmee and knowing what she might be thinking, sat down next to her, taking her hand again. This was going to be difficult. Bella spoke next, almost laughing at the absurdity of Jacob ever doing such a thing. Jacob will never do that. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Edward quickly looked to Carlisle, already knowing. A plan had to be put in motion to save Jacob and do it quickly. Listen, Jacob has always stressed honesty, and that is what I am going to do. Edward motioned to his wife to comfort Renesmee, but he could tell Bella was too far gone. Bella's rage was boiling to a point where he really had to worry about who this news would affect more. Chelsea is one of the most powerful Volturi. She has the ability to manipulate feelings and relationships, and she is the best. No one can resist her, possibly not even Bella. Put me in a room with that bitch and let's find out. Bella stared down her husband, daring him to question her abilities. Renesmee felt the terrifying feelings creeping into her. She felt like she had a terrible sunburn and was finding it very hard to breathe. The way Jacob and her left each other, the things said. She wanted to vomit from the pain shooting through her. I know you're all wondering how Alice was able to see Jacob. Apparently the wolf gene is being suppressed, which has allowed Alice to now see Jacob. This could be a good thing, as the Volturi probably didn't realize Alice can see now. The only problem, she can't see past the current vision. Everything goes blank again. Alice then spoke with a shaky voice. Chelsea, combined with Jane's power and Felix's strength, they are torturing Jacob in every way possible. Physically by Jane and Felix, mentally and emotionally by Chelsea. There is a good chance that his resolve is already gone. No one could last more than a day with those three. Edward gave a worried look over to Renesmee. Bella looked to Carlisle. Call everyone. This ends today. Bella stormed out of the house, heading to their cabin to begin preparations for war. Renesmee couldn't take the pain any longer, vividly seeing in her mind what they were doing to Jacob. The thought of what Chelsea wanted her husband for flipping a switch inside her, Jake's girl, was no longer present. Renesmee excused herself. Grandfather, I will be using your jet. Everyone was completely silent, all eyes on the hybrid. My pack will bring back our alpha. She heard the howling stop as she linked with Seth and Leah. The next thing she knew, they were both meeting her at the door. a look of pure determination on their faces. "We will leave tonight." Renesmee went to the door to be with her pack, Rosalie right there with them as always. Rosalie, standing stoically right next to Renesmee, understanding what needs to be done. She looked to Carlyle. "Father, we need you to come up with a plan for implementing the new leadership council for vampires." Rosalie, "Honey, why would I need to do that?" Carlyle looked at his daughter, who looked from each member of her pack and back to him. "Because we're going to kill them all." With that she left out the front door with her pack. Blank. Jacob had to admit he was a little disappointed when he regained consciousness. Not because of the excruciating pain, but the fact he couldn't dream link with his wife. And that's also when he realized something: why wasn't he healing and why couldn't he phase? He felt a presence in the room as he opened his eyes. It was evil in the purest sense. He wondered briefly if that was why he wasn't healing. He knew the pain was from the fractures and bruises, not from some voodoo vampire ability. He wondered if somehow they had the ability to block his transformation. He didn't recall any of these Volturi scumbags being able to do anything like that. "You're wondering why you're not healing." Jacob sensed something strange about that voice. It was a female voice, and had a familiarity to it, and yet it didn't. The strange thing was, her words almost calmed him, soothed him, wanted him to know more. "Don't bother trying to phase either, it won't work." The person behind the voice slowly approached the wolf, admiring every inch of him. "Why don't you untie me and we'll put that theory to test?" Jacob hated the way she was looking at him. This demon better pray his wife doesn't find out, or God help them all. The leech wagged her finger in front of him. "I think I like you right where you are." Jacob could see the eyes go down below his waist as she approached him seductively. Damn, this was creepy, he felt as he saw her eyes looking like they wanted to devour him. "Have these vampires never seen a wolf before? We've studied you for a very long time. Trying to find your weakness, understand more about you and your kind." Chelsea seductively licked her bottom lip as she admired the specimen before her. "We thought we had you a couple years ago, but the Cullen whore saved you. We actually didn't expect that, or your resistance to the venom combined with tranquilizers. But you definitely proved to be the one true alpha." Jacob thought back. The newborn attack, was that what she was talking about? Tranquilizers too. What the hell was going on? He didn't even notice the vampire mere inches from him now. "Chelsea, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Arrow is still recovering." A second voice came from the back of the room. Jacob wanted to rip his ears out hearing that almost screeching sound coming from the mouth of the familiar red-eye witch. He struggled a bit, trying to free himself, trying to induce the phase, but he just didn't have the strength. "I think I can handle it, Jane." The vamp, looking like she wanted to devour Jacob, said viciously to the vampire behind her. "Don't say I didn't warn you, Chelsea." Jacob saw the vampire in front of him, apparently named Chelsea, pause for a moment. Tea was all he needed as he prepared to kick out at her. He knew it wouldn't be a lot, but he had to try. He was just about to do it when Chelsea shook her head. "You will want me, Wolf. You will want every part of me." Jacob could feel a sudden change in him, almost as if he was splitting in two. It wasn't a pain necessarily, as it was an inner war between his heart and mind. He closed his eyes trying to resist the force hitting him. Then, as if the inner battle wasn't enough, the Chelsea witch spoke again, but he ignored it, his full concentration on fighting his inner battle. Jacob fought down urges that were trying to be forced upon him. He was afraid to speak, not knowing what might actually come out. Even so, he would not let any thought except his wife enter his brain. Jacob had strength to respond through gritted teeth. "My wife's gonna kick your ass." Jacob didn't see the momentary fear in Chelsea's eyes. Her expression was quickly schooled as a hesitant smile appeared now. "Looks like Arrow's pet needs a bit more conditioning. Felix." Jacob promised himself if he actually made it through this, Felix will be the first one he kills. He would have chose Chelsea as the first. But once Nessie finds out how the vampire looked at him, there wouldn't be anything left anyway. He smiled, thinking what his wife was going to do to anyone that harmed him. It was short-lived as he felt his ribs crack as the large vampire started pummeling him into unconsciousness. Jacob was in and out of consciousness, unfortunately for him, no more dream links. It was like the connection to his IFE was somehow severed as if his Nessie had just disappeared. He was teetering on the edge of sanity and really wanting to step right over. The physical pain wasn't so bad, he's had worse, but it was the psychological stuff that was wearing on him. He was a simple man, he was the hammer and vampires were the nail. He saw, he destroyed, simple. Of course with his wife, it opened up a whole new level of capabilities. She would definitely be a level 5 mutant if there was such a thing, and if he was honest with himself, he wasn't so sure there weren't men running around with adamantium blades or suits of iron. He was like the big green guy, he was good at smashing stuff. But since he was strung up, the voodoo vamps had been doing a number on him. The beatings by themselves he could take, but voodoo, beating, voodoo, beating. Voodoo was wearing him down. He knew he was pissing off the vamps with lady parts because it was obvious they were used to getting their way, and that wasn't happening with Jacob. They seemed very confident at first, Jacob overhearing them talk about their powers working on other wolves, but of course, no other wolf was like him. He had Nessie. You truly do love her, don't you? Jacob freaked out, not realizing that someone was in the room with him. That someone having a deep male voice instead of fingernails on the chalkboard, high-pitched screams from the vampirinas. Jacob saw the very tall vampire approach him. I know you. He recognized the man as one of the council and also one of the guys Carlyle actually mentioned before. Marcus, isn't it? Yes. Marcus approached carefully. I want you to know I was never for this course of action. Jacob could see the man looked up at his bindings. Jacob actually believed him. If this was the guy he remembered, he was involved in some kind of tragic love story. That might work to Jacob's advantage. I don't suppose you'd untie me and let me go. Marcus attempted a smile, but it came out more as a forced smirk. Not yet. Jacob had hope. Maybe, just maybe. So young Alpha, tell me about your mate. Jacob knew he could do this one of two ways. Be the obnoxious smart ass that he was with the others, or may be trust in Carlyle's original assessment of this guy that he heard during the preparation for the Volturi almost war. Jacob remembered Carlyle saying if there was anyone that might help them, it would be Marcus. Jacob decided to go with the Jacob post-Nessie approach. Her name is Renesmee, and she is without a doubt, the love of my life. My life starts and ends with her. Jacob could see the man pondering this, reminiscing as if he might know the feeling. I will tell you, young wolf, I've read many bonds between people, your Renesmee's parents being one of the strongest I've ever sensed. Marcus paused, looking at his left hand as if he expected something to be there. I can honestly say, in all my time on this earth, when I read the bond between you two, even at her young age, it's the strongest I've ever felt between two people. It surprised Jacob that this man even would have done that during the almost fight, especially with all those people around. But he did remember the straw NGE look Marcus gave him when he and Nessie approached Arrow when Arrow wanted to meet Renesmee. Well, she's my imprint. Marcus shook his head. My young man, the imprint has nothing to do with it. I've read wolves and their imprints. This is much more than that. It's been one of the driving reasons I've tried to persuade Arrow not to capture you for years. Years, Jacob thought. How long has this been in the works? It wasn't like Jacob could trust the guy, but he sure did seem legit. Not to mention, the guy was pretty much on point with his relationship to Nessie. I mean, sometimes I think she was the one who imprinted on me. She is that hardcore when it comes to me. Marcus looked away, sadness hitting him. I had someone like that once. A very long time ago. This was it, Jacob thought. What happened to her? Marcus reluctantly replied, she was killed. Did you ever find the person responsible? No. Marcus could feel an inner struggle going on. You ever wonder why? The door to the room opened and Vampirina number 2 walked in. Marcus, Arrow would like to speak with you. Marcus looked at Chelsea and then back at Jacob. Something the young changeling said sparked a thought in his head. T was quickly squashed when Chelsea came in, but he knew he wanted to find out more and maybe the Alpha would help him. Not a lot of things in his world made sense after his beloved died, but this Jack Ob's love for his hybrid mate and vice versa was something he could relate to. He needed something real, something he understood, because things had been like a dreary dream for him and he wanted it to end. Blank. Renesmee hated doing it, deceiving her family, but she would not put them in danger. She looked around Carlyle's plane, the one they stole. Rose W. As flying it and Leah and Seth were sitting next to Renesmee, contemplating what was about to happen. Renesmee should have known that trying to come over by themselves would never be allowed. That was why after they were stopped from leaving, Carlisle refusing to allow them to use the plane until they could all figure out a better plan. She agreed, making sure it was not too convincing on how easily she gave in. She couldn't chance the pack knowing the real plan, but they followed her without question when her and Rosalie snuck out later that night. Renesmee regretted leaving her family, especially her mom who was still on a warpath. But she needed to concentrate, she needed her pack. They would have a much better chance as a small unit than a large group like Bella wanted. They had a plan and it involved stealth. Using her illusions ability she gained from Safrina, but also strategic acting. Renesmee would have to tap into all her gifts but the key would be Rosalie, Seth, and Leah. Renesmee could only get them so far due to the limitations on her illusion ability, so it would be up to the three of them to be able to pull off the other deception to allow her to find and save Jacob. She knew. And the pack knew this was probably a one-way trip. She felt bad but she knew that the pack needed to do this, the pain they would go through if they lost their alpha and not done anything would destroy them all. So they all decided to do this together, never a doubt in anyone's mind. Renesmee did not want to think about what was happening to Jacob, that would just distract her. Jacob had trained her for this. Trained her to be the best. Her powers would be needed and Jacob had taught her so much. Renesmee remembered the first time they really trained. She was so timid, not wanting to even remotely hurt her alpha. He reprimanded her back then and she learned from that moment. He warned her the Volturi would never stop coming. Renesmee determinedly looked out the window of the plane, realizing they were getting close. One way or the other, after today, they absolutely would stop coming. Jacob had to admit, the last beating and mind game did some damage. He'd really thought he was getting somewhere with Marcus but then evil Vampirina number 2 must have really took issue because the beating she had Felix put on him nearly ended him. It was after the beating though that really made him want to vomit and push him over the edge. He finally had a glimpse of what was intended. They wanted him to take this Chelsea the vampire as a mate, have him impregnate some hybrid chick, and together they would command the wolves as Volturi pets, all the while creating a master race of vampire-wolf hybrids. Big problem with their plan is that they still could not sever the bond he had with Nessie. Didn't stop them from trying though, adding in what seemed like a competition between Vampirina 1 and 2. On a brighter note, Jacob realized if they wanted him to try and impregnate a hybrid, that maybe it was possible for Nessie to get pregnant. Wasn't exactly the right time to think about that stuff, but it helped in his resistance to the torture, knowing that Nessie might finally get everything that she had wanted. Jacob didn't have much strength left, he knew his body would be giving out soon, and while he wished the noble plight of fighting to live for Nessie would sustain him for a while, he didn't have much left. Something strange was eating away at his resolves, he assumed it must have been some vampire voodoo, and while it couldn't completely overtake him, it was doing enough to break his spirit. So here he hung, teetering on consciousness, his eyes closed as the Jane thing was near him, trying to study him. It was so creepy to Jacob the way she looked at him. It made his skin crawl and not much was able to do that. He figured keeping his eyes closed would at least allow him to think of his beautiful wife. Picturing just how truly beautiful she was from her long, silky white legs, her perfect breasts. The way her hair hung perfectly over her strong shoulders. Her lips, those perfect soft inviting lips that called for him now. Jacob suddenly cringed in mid-thought. Jane's hands on his bruised and battered chest was the last straw as the darkness crept into his mind. Nessie. Last thing he remembered right before drifting off into the dream link was hearing the Jane lady scream in pain and then the dream link happened. It was then that Jacob opened his eyes and saw her. The pain started disappearing, the hurt, the fogginess, everything left him as he read at the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Nessie. Jacob noticed something very peculiar about the dream link. They weren't at their normal dream link beach, they were still in the torture room. And he was still strung up from the rafters. That was odd, he thought. It was nice that his body was instantly starting to feel better, and he could definitely feel his body healing, but why would the dream link let him stay here? In this position, he wondered. Of course none of that mattered as his beautiful and determined wife cautiously approached him. First thing Jacob noticed was her eyes. He had never seen such fierce determination in them before. Nessie was always determined, pretty much every day, but this was magnified like 10 times. Jacob also noticed her hair was tied up, not in a braid, but pulled back in a Tomb Raider look. It made her look younger, if that was possible, but it also made her look more badass. Even with the bits of crystallized shards in her hair, it still almost glowed in the dimly lit room. Jacob's breath caught as she was almost on him. He could see her shaking a bit, but she wasn't crying or anything. He could sense the strong emotions coming from her, but she still hadn't said anything. Which was odd in the dream link. Usually he would have at least got a hi. Hey honey. Jacob was able to squeak out loud, thankful again that the dream link had owed him this last chance to be with Nessie. Jacob could feel the power emanating from her body as she was right in front of him now. He saw her wince as she scanned over his body, seeing the cuts, bites, and bruises. He could see her expression change when she lingered on the bite marks. He almost whimpered at the anger in her eyes seeing those. But all the pain seemed to disappear as the love of his life reached a trembling hand to touch his chest, still no words. Nessie's warm touch on his chest sent such heat and electricity through him that he thought his body was about to burst. Jacob Fly wondered if she used one of her abilities on him. He could instantly feel himself filling with power. Unfortunately, being away from Nessie for this long, feeling her touch, seeing her in this all-black skin-tight outfit, there was something else on him filling with something. He saw recognition in Nessie's eyes as she looked down below his waist. It was then he saw a change come over her. Did she just lick her lips staring at my? When Nessie looked back up in his eyes, he could see a hunger in them. Not a hunger like when she wanted his blood, but a hunger like she wanted something more. Jacob smiled. The dream link, as wonderful as it was, had never allowed Jacob and Nessie to be together. Jacob could tell that was about to change. He really loved the dream link right about then. Although he still couldn't understand why Nessie hadn't said anything, and why he was still tied up hanging from the ceiling. Jacob could see Nessie contemplating something. He wasn't sure why the hesitation as she looked like she was weighing something in her head. He noticed her reach both hands down to the waistband of her extremely form-fitting black leggings, and all he could think was if this is it. He couldn't be happier to go out this way. That is when he heard a strange voice in his head, it's time. It almost felt as if he was linking with his pack. He hated had interruption because once he heard it, his Nessie reluctantly removed her hands from her waistband, a slight disappointment in her eyes. Hey honey, it's okay, this is the dream link so I don't mind. While yes I would like to make love to you without being tied up, I've missed you so much I really don't mind. It would be nice to forget this torture stuff for just a few hours or however long you need. Jacob could see Renesmee rethink her decision as once again she looked down below his waist. Unfortunately her mind must have been made up as instead of doing what he was hoping she would, shish. He reached up to untie him only to be stopped by the door behind her being slammed open. Jacob leaned his head to the side to see Chelsea and Felix enter his dream link. No way, you guys need to get out of my dream link. This is just for me and my. You're not in a dream link Jax, we're here to save you. That voice again Rosé. That's when the realization hit him as his wife now stood silently between him and the two bane of his existence. This was real. I see your imprintee has come to wish us congratulations, my lover. Chelsea smiled as she looked upon Jacob. Jacob almost cowered in fear as Renesmee slowly turned her head back to him, an anger emanating from her that Jacob could actually feel. Jacob just rolled his eyes, motioning with his head the current situation he was in and the current shape of his body. As if that should explain everything to Nessie. Still looking at him, Jacob had to smile as Nessie's eyes started glowing bright blue. He's quite the lover little hybrid child. The things he did to me she never finished as Renesmee exploded into the two surprised vampires. Jacob tried to concentrate on phasing, he could feel his power returning and knew it was close as his eyes started to burn. He wasn't necessarily worried about his wife, who had already destroyed Felix, the once enormous Volturi reduced to mere sand. Yes, he was disappointed he didn't get a chance to do it himself. But he was sure there would be more opportunities to kill more Volturi scum. Jacob could sense the phase coming as he saw the look of terror in Chelsea's eyes, no longer so confident as she was pinned up against the wall. Both arms missing as Renesmee had a firm grip on her neck, sparks of electricity coming from both her hands. There was a loud crash as the rafters gave in a burst. Air hit the room as now Chelsea was facing a very large russet wolf and his angry wife, their eyes glowing a magnificent luminescent blue. Jacob came up near Renesmee. "She tried to kiss me, honey," Jacob linked. Chelsea saw the look in the bright glowing blue eyes of the hybrid, and the last thing to go through her mind was the woman's forehead. Blank. While Renesmee was freeing Jacob, it was the rest of the pack's job to distract the council, which wasn't too hard to do considering here stood a Cullen member with her 2 pets. Renesmee had gotten them tea. The entrance while she went to find Jacob, the Volturi still unaware of her presence. It was up to the rest of the pack to provide the distraction. A Cullen and 2 wolves was enough to gather the attention of the Volturi council. What better distraction? If it isn't the young Rosebud and her 2 wolf pups. "Come to join us, young Rosebud." Arrow was not surprised by the Cullens coming to save their pet. Just who they sent did surprise him a bit. He was hoping for one of his favorites, but maybe young Rose would be the dangling carrot needed for Alice or Edward to come forth. Arrow also read the giant gray and sandy wolf standing on each side of Rosalie. This would make such a great addition to his already growing collection. Arrow took a quick glance towards the side, wondering what was taking Chelsea, Felix, and Jane so long. He had sent Marcus to go gather them, but none of them had returned yet. Rosalie quickly scanned the area, realizing Marcus, Jane, and Felix were not present. The doors behind her were closed, and she could sense 6 more Volturi, hiding in the shadows. That made 9, including Arrow, Alec, and Keys. Arrow and Keys sitting smugly upon their thrones. More are massing outside Rose, Seth linked. Sensing the impending doom so close behind them, Rosalie quickly focused back to the task at hand. She thanked Seth as she figured this might be the case. Although the Volturi were confident that no one would attack them on their own turf, Arrow was obviously not going to take any chances. Which of course also meant this was a suicide mission. "You two, I don't think we're going to make it out of this one." Rosalie reached to each side of her, touching her pack mates, feeding off the connection they all had. "It's been an honor to be part of this pack." Leah and Seth turned to Rose and nodded in agreement. They knew before they made the trip they were not coming back. None of it mattered though, as long as they freed their alpha from what the Volturi intended to do to him. It was heartbreaking to know that this would be the end, but Renesmee had made sure they understood that no matter what, her or Jake would never serve the Volturi and would rather die than be subject to their rule. Arrow had gotten up to approach Rosalie, with Keys and Alec close behind, confident even with his prized enforcer still missing. "So tell me, young Rose, with all the talent in your adopted family, why did they choose you to join? What makes you so special? Or were you a pity gift by Carlisle?" Arrow was almost in front of her, making sure Keys and Alec were still backing him up. A very loud growl came from both wolves. Rosalie knew she had to do everything to keep from letting Arrow touch her. Her years of training with being a bitch to Jax was about to pay off. "I really don't know. Maybe it's my charming personality." Arrow heard the laughter next to him, giving a quick reprimanded look towards Alec and Keys. He did not like being shown up, especially by some talentless vampire. "I'm not sure that was the only reason, Rosebud. But don't worry, your talents will definitely be used here among the Volturi." Arrow smiled as he winked at Keys. "Our coven will enjoy the benefits of having someone with your gifts available to them." Arrow heard the growls coming from the 2 wolves next to the Cullen girl. Didn't stop him from continuing his beratement. "I think your gifts will satisfy a lot of our ranks. Be calm, you two." Rosalie knew that Seth and Leah would not allow this to continue, but she just needed a few. That's when she felt it. She slowly lowered her head and closed her eyes. Sensing the change happening, Seth and Leah felt it too as they both closed their eyes, feeling the power flow through them. Arrow tilted his head a bit, trying to look into the eyes of the harlot before him. "Come on, Rosebud, I'm sure you will enjoy it, just like you did with your first fiancé and his friends." Still head lowered, eyes closed, Rosalie asked, "You want to know what my power is?" Arrow was about to respond but was cut off as the blonde vampire continued. My power is when I love something or care for something, I never give up, I never stop until they're safe. I'll do anything to protect the ones I love. Arrow, Alec, and Keys all took a step back, feeling a change happening between the three in front of them. They all sensed the power emanating from before them. You happen to have taken someone I love very much. And now you will have to pay the ultimate price. Rosalie slowly lifted her head, her pack following suit, bright glowing blue eyes emanating from the three of them. Arrow expected the attack to happen to him only to be surprised that the three attacked as one Alec, shredding him to pieces before anyone realized what was happening. Keys was next as neither he nor Arrow were expecting this tactic. Keys tried to use his speed but the wolves were too fast, one grabbing his leg while the other wrapped its powerful jaws around his midsection. Last thing he saw was the blonde harlot in front of him, smiling as all three twisted at the same time, cutting him into 3 pieces, ending his life. Arrow finally regaining some sense, backing away, hoping that his peons would attack giving him a chance to escape. He quickly distanced himself from the 3 killing machines before him as he tried to leave through the back of the sanctuary. He almost made it out the back entrance before he was stopped by his ally, Marcus. Maybe he would stay after all, Arrow confidently thought to himself until he really looked into the eyes of his one-time brother-in-law. He knows, was his one horrifying thought as Arrow's arms were ripped from his body. A giant blue-eyed russet wolf and the blue-eyed half-breed raced past him, the remnants of his once power. All arms in one's jaw and the other's hands. Arrow's eyes then widened as Marcus grabbed him around the throat, his life force being squeezed from his body. It didn't take long for the entire pack, including their alphas who had been led back to the council room by Marcus, to dispatch of the remaining Volturi that were willing to put up a fight. The alpha pack doing what they did best, working as a complete unit. Each feeding off the power of their alphas. After the sparkled dust that littered the air faded, there was only a few Volturi left in the immediate room, Marcus and those loyal to him. It took all the restraint Rose had not to end him, but her alphas insisted to wait as all their blue eyes returned to normal. Jax, there is a small army of Volturi right outside that door, we need to end this now. Rose anxiously looked to the locked door at the end of the hall that was now eerily quiet. Rose, just a sec. Marcus is on our side now and we need him if we ever want a chance of getting out. All the wolves phased back, including Jacob, each quickly putting on the change of clothes Rose had brought. Nessie then walked up to Rose and told Seth and Leah to come over too. Renesmee proceeded to project what happened with Marcus. Renesmee and Jacob had just finished destroying any remnants of Volturi in Jacob's torture room when Marcus suddenly appeared. Renesmee instantly leapt to ward him only to have Jacob restrain her. Normally, that might have turned her on, but not in their current state. Ness, wait, he might be able to help us. Jacob could see the change in Marcus's eyes. No longer did they look glossy, as if a fog was over them. Now they looked alert and attentive, almost as if he was suddenly awakened after a long sleep. Jacob remembered when Nessie first showed her abilities to Arrow at the Almost War. She also consumed his inner thoughts, revealing at that time a small glimpse into Arrow's betrayal. Jacob could see now that Chelsea was gone, it might be a good time to show Marcus the truth. Jacob knew Nessie was not in a good mood and wasn't sure she would even listen to him. He knew their only hope of living a peaceful life is to somehow get Marcus on their side. At least it wouldn't hurt to try. So he did what he thought he would never have to do to Nessie, he used his alpha voice. Renesmee, show Marcus what happened to his wife. Renesmee turned angrily towards Jacob, the bloodlust still coursing through her veins. But even in this state, she could not deny her alpha. She added the use of his alpha voice to her, angry at Jacob, list. Renesmee walked to Marcus and projected her vision from Arrow's and Chelsea's mind. Now the pack understood the importance of keeping Marcus as an ally. A high-ranking Volturi, revealing the lies and deception of the council could provide a gateway to usher in a new era of leadership. Rosalie, now able to think a little more clearly with her pack beside her, turned to Marcus. Marcus, all we've ever wanted is to just live in peace. Rosalie pleaded with Marcus although she was just as willing to die fighting if that was needed too. Marcus nodded his head in understanding. Now that Chelsea's influence was gone, he was able to process everything that had happened over the past centuries. He was also able to see clearly the true intent of the Alpha's pack. He could sense the unwavering bond bet. In all of them, it actually overwhelmed him, the strength of that bond. Marcus turned to Jacob. "Thank you, young Alpha, for allowing me to finally know the truth. I owe you both for this, and I will swear to you an allegiance going forth between the Volturi and Carlisle's coven and all its allies." Rosalie approached him. "Will you allow us to leave in peace?" Marcus looked towards Renesmee. "I don't think that will be a problem." Rosalie looked back towards the closed door where she knew the vast remaining army of Volturi were sure to avenge their fallen. It suddenly blew off its hinges as those outside started pouring in. Seth and Leah bumped fists as they saw their entire family come in, including all of Sam's pack. Renesmee now stood beside her Alpha, her hand grabbing strongly onto his. Jacob barely had time to register as Bella and Esme flashed into them, engulfing both him and Renesmee in a fierce hug. Bella was furious at her daughter for taking off without them, but her happiness at finding Jacob alive and well in their pack more than made up for it. Bella grabbed Jacob's chin, forcefully turning it down towards her. "Don't you ever do that again. Love you too, Bells." Jacob felt a slight pain in his hand, which was still held tightly by his wife. It made it awkward to try and hug everyone, but he had given up on trying to let go as it was obvious Nessie was not allowing it. Jacob looked past the woman in his life to witness something that he never thought possible. Every single one of Carlisle's friends and allies were standing there, even some he didn't recognize. It was an even bigger group than the one that was assembled for witnesses in the almost war. Bella could see the emotion in Jacob's eyes as he looked at everyone that came. "They came for you, Jacob." Jacob quickly shot his head down towards Bella. "Me? Why would they risk? Never mind, I think I understand." Jacob looked to his wife, who still hadn't spoken to him. He was able to free himself from Lee's grip, although Esme would not let go of him. So instead, he brought both Esme and Nessie under his giant arms. He kissed Esme on the top of the head and then his wife, who for the first time, looked uncomfortable in his side. "I love you, Nessie. I know something is bothering you and we'll figure it out. But thank you for saving me again. I love you, Mrs. Black." Jacob smiled as he felt the slightest relaxation from Nessie as she once again fit perfectly by his side. After saying their hellos and greetings, Jacob pulled aside Marcus, Sam, and Carlisle, who brought Tanya with him, to talk about the future. Carlisle had agreed to help form a new council alongside Marcus. Carlisle also had asked Tanya to help form this new council to make sure their type of vegetarian coven would be represented. What Carlisle wasn't expecting was the instant connection it seemed between Marcus and Tanya. Jacob could see the strong connection too, as the first thing Marcus did was apologize for his lack of action in the death of Tanya's sister. He didn't offer an excuse, although he might have had a good one, just his heartfelt apology. This seemed to touch Tanya as she gladly accepted. "Maybe there is hope." Jacob linked to Nessie, who was still next to him. He felt the squeeze of his hand as he suddenly wondered if that would be their only form of communication from this point on. Jacob and Sam also offered up an alliance similar to what they had with the Cullens to the Volturi, the stipulation being that they must adhere strictly to the same rules. Marcus agreed in principle, and at the very least, promised no harm would come to humans under the protection of the Quileute. It was a start at least, Jacob thought, realizing massive changes would not happen overnight. Carlisle had promised to help create new laws for the Volturi and come back often to make sure everything was going as planned. Marcus could not object, knowing how much everyone looked up to Carlisle. Satisfied with the current situation, Jacob figured it was time to finally go home. "You ready to go home, honey?" One squeeze of the hand. Guess in their new form of communication that was a yes. As they prepared to leave, Jacob paused one final time, looking over the depth of love and family that he and Renesmee both had. He couldn't help himself as he leaned to his side, still looking out over everyone. "Ness, I think this will add a great chapter to our story." No squeeze, so he turned his head to look at his wife. He was greeted by a quick kiss, but then back to just the hand-holding. "I don't suppose, and they lived happily ever after, would come into play quite yet." His answer was 2 squeezes of the hand and a slight growl. "Didn't think so. Can't blame a wolf for trying though." He kissed his wife one more time as he knew this was going to one long trip home. It was times like this where Jacob really wished he had the book on how to show the hybrid super vampire, who is madly in love with him, that he really does love her. The ride home in the plane was brutal for Jacob because Nessie still hadn't spoken to him, linked with him, or projected to him. The only reason he hadn't completely lost it was due to the fact that Nessie hadn't let go of his hands since the moment they left the Volturi council room. He tried talking to her, tried reassuring her everything would be okay, but nothing worked. She just kept her head turned, looking out the window of the plane, and didn't even acknowledge his existence, other than a squeeze of his hand. Every so often her body would jerk, like waking up suddenly from a nightmare. And then she would look to him, as if she expected him to disappear, still no communication though. They were approaching their newly built home in La Push and Jacob just didn't get why she was so upset and worried yes, but to this level no. There is no way Nessie could even remotely believe the crap that Chelsea Witch spewed. It got to the point where he just gave up trying to console her because nothing was working and he was still hurting, not so much physically, but mentally. It felt like his brain had sneezed inside his head. They finally walked through the door to their home when Nessie finally released Jacob's hand. It was also then that Renesmee broke down, falling to her knees in the middle of the living room. Jacob reached out to comfort her only to be rebuked. "Don't touch me right now." Jacob quickly pulled back his hand. The venom in his wife's voice was very palpable, the first he heard her speak in days. Jacob could see her hyperventilating as she kept making noises where Jacob thought for sure she was about to scream. He felt hurt at her rebuttal, but it was obvious she was in pain and it frustrated him even more that he couldn't figure out how to comfort her. "I honestly don't know what I can do, Nessie. I love you, I'm sorry that I was captured." Jacob contemplated what to do next. "Do you want me to get your mom? Maybe it would be best I have her come over and then I'll just stay at the main house." He never finished as Renesmee launched herself at him, picking him up off his feet and slamming him against the far wall. Her speed, strength and power completely catching him off guard. Jacob was pinned against the wall, Renesmee slamming both hands into his chest not allowing him to move. He could see the fire in her eyes, the worry, the anger, the sadness. He had never seen her this wild. He could only imagine this must have been how Rosalie felt when Renesmee attacked her thinking she was killing him. Renesmee could know. T pieced together words as the rage filled her. She couldn't think as she looked into Jacob's eyes, realizing she could have lost him to that demon. "Nessie, what's this really about? I don't understand why you're so upset." "Oh crap." Jacob was flung across the room crashing into the desk at the far end. He barely had time to recover as he was ripped off the floor and slammed into the wall yet again. "You left me." Renesmee screamed at him. Jacob was confused, this made no sense, she knew what had happened. "Left you." Jacob had enough as he broke her grip, quickly turning her around wrapping his giant arm around her neck as he not so gently slammed his body into her from behind. "You need to calm the hell down." Jacob had a firm grip, satisfied he had her secure when he felt a sharp pain in his forearm where she bit him. Renesmee slammed the back of her head into Jacob's mouth, bending forward and flipping him over her back and away from her. Jacob quickly recovered as he was kneeling now, wiping the blood from his cracked lips. He could see the injury must have affected Renesmee because for a moment, his loving wife was back, but only for a moment as the crazed half-breed reared its ugly head once more. Jacob now stood to full height. He was actually surprised he hadn't even remotely felt the need to phase. His body must have known that Renesmee was not a threat, although his lip would say differently. Jacob held out both hands in surrender. "You know, I suffered this kind of crap at the hands of my enemy, I don't need to suffer it at the hands of my wife." Jacob saw once again the change in Renesmee as his words must have struck a chord. "Is this what you want, Renesmee? After what we've been through, this is how you want to treat me? How you want us to be? You left me, Jacob." Jacob shook his head. This just made no sense to him. "You know, Renesmee, you keep saying that but yet there's no substance to it." Renesmee was trying to gain some semblance of control but it was no use. She just kept picturing Jacob leaving her for that vampire, leaving all their dreams behind. She couldn't get the imagined picture from her head of Jacob happily married to that vampire raising a family of their own. "Are you serious right now?" Jacob read her projection that she must have let slip. So me raising a family with another woman drives you to this point. And might I add, wasn't this what you wanted anyway? Renesmee hated his nonchalant attitude about this, as if she were a child crying about a missing toy. When will you just get it, Jacob? Renesmee stormed up to stand toe-to-toe with the source of her anger. Get what, Ness? I'm honestly trying to figure you out right now, but this jealousy rage is very unbecoming. Jacob took a hard shot right to the mouth. Don't you dare belittle my feelings right now. Renesmee would not back down. Jacob needed to know what he did to her, the hell he put her through. I'm doing that because you are being ridiculous, Rig. HT now. Jacob dodged another punch to the face. You're really going to need to stop hitting me, wife. The last word dripping with sarcasm. Or what, Jacob? Renesmee was inches from his face. Are you going to leave me again? Jacob had it, shoving Renesmee away from him. Why do you keep saying that? I did not leave you. I was taken, damn it. Beaten and almost died, might I add, all because I wouldn't leave you. Jacob ignored the blood pouring from his lip as he stared down his wife. You know what really gets me here? Our whole life, all we ever were with each other was honest. I never told you anything but the truth. I never held anything back from you. And now, all of a sudden we can't communicate effectively. I'm not buying it. Jacob looked right at her. She needed to know how serious he was about the next words. Maybe we shouldn't have gotten married so soon because obviously you still need to grow the hell up. Jacob prepared for the attack. Unfortunately, all he got was a broken and defeated love of his life. Renesmee just bowed her head, her long bronze hair covering the hurt, the pain. All she could do was shake her head. I thought I lost you. Jacob sighed. And your actions now are your way of what? Keeping me around. Renesmee started shaking again, but this time not due to rage. I can't stop thinking about you leaving me. Jacob took a deep breath. Nessie, will you please just tell me you love me? We can then go from there. Barely above a whisper, her body shutting down. I do love you, Jake. More than anything. Just not more than only the thought of me leaving you. Jacob took a step towards her, seeing his words hitting her, the impact causing her shoulders to shake from the tears now flowing. Ness, we could go back and forth with this all day. I'm your husband, and you need to have faith in me that I'll never hurt you. You need to trust me, trust my love for you. Jake, I do trust you. I don't even know why I'm so mad at you. I understand you probably only did those things with Chelsea and Selena because you were influenced, but the thought of you with them, it kills me, Jake. Renesmee tried to fight back the tears, ding Jake to understand her pain, but fearing her actions might do exactly what she feared most. Jake, if you died, then I end, plain and simple. It would be sad to leave my parents and family, but not even a choice for me. I cease to exist if something happened to you. But you leaving me for them, how do I cope with that? I went through hell and they only had 3 days with you, what would happen? And if we didn't get there to break the spell? You're my Jake, you're mine, I just can't share no matter what I said before. Jake finally got it. She didn't mean leave necessarily in the literal sense, she meant it in the physical. Finding someone's sense. He assumed she would have used her gift on him already, but even now, she was abiding by their personal rule of figuring out their relationship as a normal couple. Of course, what just happened with the Volturi was not normal, so maybe it was time his wife really knew what happened. And if anything, at least she now would truly see what her words meant about finding someone else to start a family with. Jacob reached out to his trembling wife. He carefully grabbed her hand and held it to his cheek. You want to know how much I love you, see for yourself. With that, Jacob opened himself up for Renesmee to read him, all of him. Renesmee was hesitant at first, not wanting to see what obviously happened. But she needed to face it, deal with it, and move on. It wasn't Jacob's fault. She knew Chelsea was one of the most powerful Volturi, and even though it hurt her to think of losing Jacob even for those few days, she still had to get this over with. Jacob could feel the link happening. He let himself open to anything his wife needed to see, fitting the one ability that could prove to her what really happened was the ability she gained from the stupid Volturi leech that started all this. It wasn't really even her fault because in everything that happened, he didn't think to inform her that nothing like that happened. He assumed she knew, but understood a little more what that must have been like for her. He couldn't fathom the thought of someone else being with Nessie. That sure explained her reaction. Renesmee used her ability and instantly saw the way they treated her Jacob. She saw them try to manipulate him, torture him, seduce him, break him. But he never gave in. He fought them even when they tried to destroy everything that was him. What sealed it for her was every beating, every psychological torture they did to her poor Jacob. Only one word he kept repeating: Nessie. When she was done, she realized just how wrong she had been. She should have known better than to think even the strongest Volturi could break her husband. And now she had to deal with the fact that she treated the love of her life like crap. Renesmee moved her hand cautiously from Jacob's cheek to the back of his head, running her fingers through his hair. I don't know what to say, honey. She couldn't help the quiver in her bottom lip as the tears continued to fall. The vision of what her Jake did for her still vividly in her mind, the suffering he went through for her. Enough was enough, and Jacob knew it. The wanting a family situation had caused enough problems between them, and they didn't need this. They would figure out something in the future, but for now, they just needed each other. How about you start by telling me how much you love me? Renesmee shyly looked down as her crazy emotions were exploding inside her everywhere. She loved this man so fiercely that she really started to believe she had a sickness. But she would deal with her insecurities, and she knew Jacob would be there for her, through anything. Renesmee looked back up into the eyes of her eternal mate. She finally had the opportunity to do something that she didn't have the opportunity to do before they were married. She finally would be able to show Jacob just how much she did love him, how much she needed him, and she wouldn't have to use stupid words to do it. Renesmee reached down and grabbed his hand, pulling him to the bedroom. Nessie. Words were not going to work right now, she'd just screw it up anyway. So she projected to Jacob just how she planned to show him how much she loved him. Jacob swallowed the lump in his throat as he was pulled aggressively towards their bedroom. He really had to wonder how those things Nessie showed him were even possible. He smiled entering the room. He was about to find out. It was about a week later, and Jacob and Nessie were back for their scheduled checkup. Carlisle had just gotten back from Volterra yesterday and wanted to do the checkup, making sure there were no injuries from the recent encounter with the Volturi. Carlisle could see Jacob struggling, walking into the makeshift waiting room. Injuries haven't healed yet from the torture. Jacob gingerly sat down on the soft couch, Nessie snuggling right on his lap, resting her head on his shoulder. Actually, Doc, these aren't from the torture, at least not from the Volturi. Jacob couldn't help smiling as Nessie slapped his arm. Behave, husband. Carlisle just looked at the two, noticing their very strange behavior. While Renesmee and Jacob had always been inseparable, happy, in love, Carlisle remembered how they left after the recent rescue. He could tell things had definitely gotten better for the two. Grandpa, am I going to be okay? Renesmee kissed her husband on the cheek, holding him close. Well, actually yes. I don't see any problems, and thank you, Grandpa. That's all I want to know. Carlisle was stunned, and he could tell Jacob was too. There was no mention of the ability to have children. Jacob squeezed his wife's thigh in a loving touch. Babe, don't you want to know if we can start a family? Renesmee looked with desire in her eyes that told Jacob he was all she needed. I have all the family I could ever want right here in my arms. I love you, Jake. Renesmee leaned in to kiss her husband, projecting to him just how much he meant to her. How much she knew she meant to him. Jacob was torn. A part of him was happy that she was okay, but a part of him also worried for her. He knew no matter what, as they always did, they would figure things out together. For now, he just wanted to enjoy kissing his wife. Blank. 1 week later, Jacob and Renesmee were sitting near their cliff. Renesmee sitting in between Jacob's legs, her back pressed up against his chest, as he held her close, both looking out over the water below. Each deep in thought. Jake, did you ever think you would be here, like this? After that first night when you were out here on your own, before I was sent to you. Jacob took a deep breath, remembering that moment a few years ago, his self-reflection. So much had changed since that moment. Honestly, no, babe. Never thought anyone like you would ever be in my life. You changed everything for me, Nessie. Renesmee brought his hands closer around her, feeding off his warmth. Jacob, I love you so much. I'm so thankful that you found me, that you never gave up. Jacob sighed, realizing just how close he came to giving up before Ness was sent to him. The pain, the heartbreak over Bella was something he never thought he would have gotten over. He was very happy to be proven wrong. I can't say it was easy, honey. Before you were born it was hell for me. I thought I knew what love was, but the minute I saw you in Rose's arms, I knew then I didn't have a clue what love was before. You changed everything for me, Ness, everything. Jacob kissed the side of Nessie's cheek, feeling her projecting to him once again her memories from their first moment together. She may have been just born, but the image of the love of her life at the moment. T of imprinting was clear as day to Renesmee. We've had quite the ride, haven't we? Renesmee was rubbing Jacob's arms, so thankful for her husband to be with her, to have this chance now to do things the right way. Looking forward to the next forever. They both laughed, realizing that this wasn't an end, this was just the beginning. It was time for their story, their beginning. The two sat quietly for the next few minutes, relishing in the cool breeze coming from the ocean. The Volturi were handled, at least for now. The phasing of younglings had slowed down and the packs were back to normal. Everything was setting up for the next chapter in their lives. That's what prompted Renesmee to speak next. Jacob, tell us our story. Jacob smiled, how fitting, he thought. A nice way to end and start a new chapter in their lives. Well, it all started when, wait a sec. Jacob interrupted the storytelling, remembering something very different about the request Nessie had given him to tell her the story. Renesmee lifted Jacob's hands to kiss them and placed them on her stomach, a huge smile plastered on her face. Jacob was trying to analyze something about her request, and the moment Renesmee placed his hands on her stomach, he felt something very different. His senses went on high alert as he could sense something different, some things different. Nessie. Yes, Jacob. Renesmee could feel the lone tear fall from her eye, making its way down her cheek and evaporating on Jacob's arm. Why did you say tell us our story? Jacob was starting to freak out, but in the best way possible. Renesmee couldn't help the happiness she was feeling as she responded to her husband. Well, I thought it would be nice for our babies to hear our story too. Jacob froze. Babies. Oh boy. The beginning.